And welcome to Beer Field Fantasy Football. I am your host at Hot BFF with 2 P's, Chris Hopper. As always, joined by Dan Thury at Thury BFF. Dan, welcome back.
I am back like usual. I'm here, doing great. I had the day off. I did not completely abide by social distancing. I played disc golf with about 3 other people and nobody at the park, so it wasn't terrible.
You're the reason we're in crisis.
I know, I'm such an asshole.
Hey, we got a guest today. We liked the 12-pack question thing so much last week that we decided that we wanted to do it again and do it for a little bit here. So we are joined by Chris Allen of the Dynasty Manual podcast, amongst many other things. Chris, welcome to the show. First time having you on. We're happy to have you here.
I mean, fellas, we were talking a bit before we got started, and this is absolutely perfect. It blends my 2 passions together, that being home brewing, or just like craft brew in general. Or let me take it even a step farther back. Let's just say beer in general, because I don't want to come off with with the the perception that I'm a beer snob, like by any stretch of the means. Because depending on, folks have come by my house and they've seen me drinking some old English. Depending on when you catch me. So between talking about some good beer and talking about fantasy football, this you can ask for a better conversational topics here. So I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Well, we're certainly happy you took time out of your day, and we can all sit back and relax together amongst these trying times. Before we get into the show, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, what it is that you do, where you show up, writing, podcasting, all that fun stuff, because you got quite the list in your Twitter bio.
I know. I guess that's kind of my thing. I'm collecting contribution credits like Thanos. I'm trying to do as much, get around as much as I possibly can in the fantasy community. But you can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. The FFWX is that stands for Fantasy Football Weather. That's where I got my start. Because I started asking questions about like how weather impacts fantasy football, and I started doing some research into that about 3 years ago, and then it just kind of blossomed from there to what we've got right now. And that's where I got my big start was at 4for4 football. That's where you'll find most of my work. But then doing some dynasty work over at Dynasty League Football. I've actually done a little bit more weather work over at Numberfire. So that you can find me over there as well. And then, of course, the Dynasty Manual podcast with my boy, Adam Wilde. So I'm around, but you can come find me wherever.
Sure. So before we get into it, actually, you mentioned doing a lot of weather work. Just I know that there's a lot more that goes into it than just what you give in a quick hitter. But give us a quick hitter on what it is that you look for and that kind of red flags you for fantasy football.
Oh, absolutely. The first and foremost is wind. That seems to be the one that impacts games the most. We talk about, I think a lot of folks have, I guess, just that negativity bias when it comes to discussing like bad weather games, because we think about those heavy like downpouring rain games like might happen in like Florida, or even like somewhere out west like California possibly, or even like the snow games that you might see in Buffalo or something like that. But even like the rain game that was actually in, I think it was like Washington, San Fran, I think, that had like the Mud Bowl like this past.
Yeah.
That was past. It's like those games we remember, and but those only happen like they don't happen all that often. But when it comes to wind, that's one of the ones that we have to adjust for the most. And typically when it gets around like 17 miles an hour, that's when my eyebrow starts to get a little raised. But anything less than that, I'm not too terribly concerned with. But really, it's not just about and this is what I wrote on one of my pieces for 4for4, was that it's not just about how fast it's moving, but it's also the direction. Because when it comes to, it's like very similar to golf. I don't know if you guys are big. Well, you were just talking about, Dan, you were talking about playing disc golf.
Yeah, and I'm a big regular golfer, so.
Yeah, so it's a similar concept, right? Because if you're, let's say, trying to throw, a frisbee into a wind, that's going to be fairly difficult than if it's just, if you have it, it's at your back, or if it's a cross breeze or something like that. So it's, I mean, all of those things, both like magnitude and velocity, is something that I took into account when doing a lot of analysis. So like I've even gone into and looked at stadiums and like the azimuth, like for a stadium and where it's positioned, and also taking into account like how the wind is blowing, whether it's I mean, directly across the stadium, or if it might present a cross breeze, something like that. So while a lot of folks might just look at, oh, it's 15 miles an hour, I need to freak out. It could be just that if it's, you know, a headwind or a tailwind, it might be something that you might not have to worry about so much. So I've done different pieces throughout, and that's this past season when I did all of my work for Numberfire. That's what I was looking into quite a bit. Was that not only was I looking at, well, how fast is the wind going to be blowing, but what direction should it be, and whether or not we should freak out, or whether or not we should, you know, start moving players around or something like that. So those are one of the big things that I started to take into account when looking at weather when it comes to fantasy football.
Nice. So should mention there were some words in there like azimuth that I think Dan went straight to dictionary.com to figure out. Chris is an engineer, so he's instantly the smartest person on this show. All right, so
right.
for the show today, we've got a kind of a combination of football questions and homebrew questions. So Chris mentioned he's very, very passionate about homebrew. Most of the listeners of the show know that that's something I picked up about 7-8 months ago. So we're going to discuss that along with football. But before we get started, as always, we got to let the people know what it is we're drinking on. Let's get into what's fueling Beerfield.
What's fueling Beerfield?
All right, I'll go ahead and start this one off. So shout out Wine and Cheese Place, one of my local liquor stores that has a contactless alcohol pickup right now. So basically, order online, pull up, call the store, they come out, they take your card information over the phone, come out, drop it in your trunk, pat you on the back, and you're good to go. Supporting Missouri breweries, so you know, in this hard time, wanted to keep it local. So we've got Four Hands Exit Strategy on today. It is a IPA with peaches, vanilla, and lactose, so of that milkshake variety. So we'll give you a review on that about halfway through. But you know, I can tell you right now, the second can, it's better than the first one was yesterday. Dan, what do you got?
I got the last of the three beers that our boy Clint did not send us. He did not send this beer from Abandoned Building Brewery. This is their barrel aged imperial stout, 12.9%. I don't believe there's any adjuncts added, so it's just straight up that imperialness that we all know and love. So more on this later, and we'll get drunk probably.
And Chris, I know you got beer. What are you drinking on?
This is actually one of my own. This is a hazy NEPA that I put together, a New England IPA.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is the base. The base is just some Pilsner, along with I think I have the recipe pulled up because I actually tweaked this recipe and started brewing this again on Saturday. But so it's Pilsner, some wheat malt, and some honey malt, and then with some lactose like added in the boil. And then for the hop additions, I've got Amarillo, Citra, and Galaxy.
Oh my god, it sounds so good.
Yeah, so it's got that. It's definitely hazy. It's definitely got that fruity aroma to it. And I think with this one, I forget. I think I added in a little bit of Warrior towards the at the beginning, just to add a little bit of bitterness to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it still has plenty of those fruity notes to it that give it that NEPA flavor. So I've enjoyed it. I really have. But it's about, this was probably maybe 6 to 8 weeks old, so it's starting to lose some of that pungency to it. So that's why I had to go ahead and brew another batch on Saturday.
Sure. So just to set the tone that this is going to be a different episode than our just consume and taste review, what was your hop schedule on that beer?
So for this one, let's see. This one had added Warrior at 60 minutes, and then nothing until 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it was, about half an ounce of Amarillo, half an ounce of Citra, half an ounce of Galaxy at 5 minutes. Whirlpool, those same 3 hops, and that's about an ounce of each of them. So Whirlpool all 3 of those, and then dry hop an ounce of each of those after primary.
Nice. And for our listeners out there, the hop schedule, the timing of it, the earlier something goes into the brew, it's typically considered a bittering hop. The more those aromas are going to dissipate as it boils off. The later, the more aroma you're going to get out of the hop. So, all the way from dry hopping from the 5-minute additions to whirlpooling to dry hopping, you're really pulling out the aromas in those different hops, as opposed to adding them at a 30-minute or 20-minute or 15 for aroma. So it's going to give a lot of character.
I'm going to learn so much this episode. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to be taking down notes and shit now.
And I actually just got into doing more whirlpool additions because the counterflow wort chiller that I have, and also with since I use the mash and boil, which actually has it has the controller and it has the digital thermometer on it. And so beforehand, when I was first getting into all grain, you could cool down your wort like as quickly as possible, but I would just crank the water on and just try and cool it as fast as I possibly can. But since I can monitor the temperature more easily, like with having the digital thermometer already set up, doing whirlpool additions has been so much easier.
Yeah,
and I really like it. I honestly do. So I've been trying to incorporate that into almost like any recipe that I do, because for me, this is my personal preference. I like having that flavor and that aroma, but if I have to sacrifice bitterness in order to get that, I'm okay with that. Sure. So like if I can do that just by doing whirlpool additions, I would rather do that than anything else. And so I prefer that technique.
Yeah, and we'll get more into all grain versus extract and things later in this episode. How Chris started out, how I started out, and more as we go along. So, but yeah, wanted to set the tone there. This is going to be a little bit different, but that's some beer talk. Now let's do some football talk. Let's get into the news. There's a little bit of it, not as much as the last couple.
A couple things.
News.
All right, so again, kind of a light news week, but one of the big things that came out as far as being made official is the expanded playoff format. So they're officially going to 14 teams, 2020, 2021. This is something we talked about a couple weeks ago when the new CBA was ratified. But so Dan and I have given our thoughts on this already at length. So Chris, I'm kind of curious, what do you think the extended... Well, one, the playoff format's going to do, especially in the, typically week 16, week 17, as far as like a fantasy schedule and strategy. And then also as part of that CBA, there was a 17-game season announced as well for starting in 2021. So how do you think that should be played with fantasy?
So my first thought was that if they're keeping just the single buy, right?
Yes.
They haven't added they haven't added a second buy. So my thought process here, or at least the first thing that came to my mind, is that so for teams that are now going to go an extra game with the extended playoffs, the idea of players starting to sit now comes that becomes clear to me. Like that becomes more of a real possibility for some of those like fantasy starters that you're relying on, like during the fantasy playoffs, like your Super Bowl, like your fan championship games. So like when we were thinking about let's see, like when Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram like wound up sitting in their season finale, like those types of players, like where you've been relying on them all season, and then now, they're definitely their teams are definitely playoff bound, but now because of this change in the expansion, what's the likelihood? I would think the likelihood of some of those guys sitting or resting becomes all the more real. I can see. I know a lot of coaches, a lot of the like old school guys that they didn't want to rest their starters, so on and so forth. But now, if you have an extra game to play, and you might have to go through an extra team like in the playoffs, a lot of those guys like might be making those business decisions, or teams might be making those decisions earlier on that we might wind up having or missing out on some of those guys like in the fantasy playoffs. So that's the first thing that kind of came to my mind, is that we might have to start picking up like handcuffs and like the RB2s and some of those guys that we would really want to really start stashing. Yeah, maybe around the playoffs, but we might have to start holding those guys maybe a couple weeks early, just in case like our guys don't make it, and we're already positioning ourselves to get into the playoffs. That was my first thought.
Yeah, like I think you're gonna see teams approach mid to early season injuries, to some of their studs, their star players, or even just their starters, and resting them longer. With only one team getting a playoff bye, it makes those last few weeks so crucial to these playoff bound teams that you're going to see potential resting of players, especially veterans that are important to that run. Players, they get nicked up in like the weeks 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You may see them start to rest up or even play less. You may even start to see more of those RB2s. You might see more, of a committee backfield. I think it's so hard to know what they're going to do because we haven't seen it happen yet. I think, you're absolutely right, Chris. You should start paying more attention to your backups. You need to start paying attention to what teams' records are, because they may do a ramp up to their playoff run by sitting some of those players, a few weeks in advance.
Sure. Load management, kind of like what you're getting in the NBA and everything, is pretty much how that boils down. All right. The Lions signed Geronimo Allison to a 1-year deal worth $1 million. Geronimo Allison have any value left?
No.
Yeah, that's what I want to say is no, especially not in an offense with Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay,
and Danny Amendola.
I was about to say,
Danny Amendola.
Like, put some respect on Danny Amendola's name. I mean,
yes, the 7 games Danny Amendola is typically healthy. He's a force to be reckoned with. The Chiefs re-signed Demarcus Robinson to a 1-year deal worth $2.3 million, so he'll have a good game, and everybody will run out to get him, and then not do anything else for the rest of the season again. I
think it all depends on what you think about Sammy Watkins. Like, is he actually going to take that year off, like he had mentioned, like prior to the Super Bowl?
He said throughout the off season that he wasn't going to, and he was just ground down. But we'll see. It is a offense that likes to pass the football. You do have some competition for targets, really, I guess, behind Kelsey, Watkins, and Tyreek Hill. And Hill and Watkins are always good to miss a couple games. Not to tag injury prone, but
that re-signing I thought was interesting though, because you had at least the semi-emergence of Mecole Hardman,
right,
like who they used like significant draft capital in order to acquire, and that's assuming they were bracing for the impact of Tyreek Hill being gone, but that didn't happen. Politics aside, I mean, that didn't happen, and so they have Mecole, they had Sammy, they've got Kelsey, and I mean, Byron Pringle, who a lot of folks in like the Dynasty community, they're hoping that he would kind of start to shine a bit more, and he popped like here and there. So they have these 2 younger guys in Hardman and Pringle. They already have established guys in, I mean, assuming Sammy's coming back, and they have Tyreek. It seemed odd that they would keep DeMarcus on, like given the fact that they have, what was the figure? Like they have $177 in cap space left.
Something like
so it just
that.
seemed, yeah, it was something absurdly low that I just figured just blow through the cap if you're going to have that little space.
Right.
It seemed odd that they would keep on a player when they seem to have quite a few wide receivers already. So to me, it felt significant, but I do agree that in every season that he's been part of the team, he's just been a guy that will pop up, and when you expect Sammy to score a touchdown, it's DeMarcus Robinson. Is that Travis Kelce? No, that's DeMarcus Robinson again. It's just like that's when he scores, is when you're expecting the other guys to score. It's never anything consistent.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So the Chiefs they're 1.6 mil below the cap. They're the only team that's in the negative range. I think this could point to them not spending up on a receiver again this year. I think with Watkins coming back and then them resigning Robinson, I think they feel pretty good about the receivers had back there, and he played a role for them. I think this is more of of an NFL move than more of a fantasy / dynasty. It just makes DFS. It just makes picking the Chiefs receivers for DFS that much more annoying. It already is.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Eagles exercised Alshon Jeffrey's 2020 option. He's coming back from a Liz Frank injury. And then in procedural moves, they picked up Wentz's 2020 option, which there was something weird about that option. I didn't really look into it much, but the text of that news article pretty much said that, like, if they hadn't picked it up, then he would have been owed $30 million, and by picking it up, he was only owed 15.2 or whatever. So this year, some money move basically on Wentz, and it was about the same thing for Ertz, who had his 2021 option picked up. So,
it says that it must be exercised by the 27th, or the salary jumps up to like 31.3 mil
for Wentz, right?
Yeah, for Wentz. I'm looking at the
contract. I'm not sure what the procedural move was on Ertz there, other than the fact that they did decide to pick it up, which there's some speculation that could mean they're talking long-term contract. That Ertz contract situation is something to watch, obviously, for Dallas Goedert, who I think is very, very popular in the Dynasty community, is showing up on redraft radars with, some of the streaming ability he showed last year. And people are going to be itching for him to take over that role. Already are. So it's just something to watch.
I want him so bad.
Everybody wants him to. He's good.
Yeah,
but
he's good.
I mean, it's been a while since we've seen two tight ends from the same team finish within the top 12. And I think as of right now, this is like early best ball ADP. Like, he's being drafted as the tight end 12. So I mean, so they're hoping that he repeats a lot of what they were able to do in 2019. Which, I mean, with the way that they used both of them, almost like seemingly interchangeably, that might be possible.
Sure.
Well, and the fact that Aguilar's gone, Arcega-Whiteside had opportunity last year and didn't really show up, and Jeffrey's injury prone to say the least. He's fine when he's healthy, but you're going to need something outside of one wide receiver, one tight end to do the pass catching work. And we all hope Miles Sanders comes along a bit in that regard as well, or a bit more in that regard. But watch how they spend on wide receiver too in the draft, and even if they spend up on a wide receiver in the draft, even as deep as it is, year one productivity out of wide receivers, a little more commonplace now than it was the last few years, but still you're more likely to get fantasy production year 2, year 3 than you are in year 1.
Yeah,
I agree, and I don't think they can go through and expect, I guess, better results, because they wound up spending it was a second round draft pick on JJ Arcega-Whiteside like last season.
Yep.
And we see how that turned out. I mean, so unless they're really willing to put in like a day one pick, so we're talking like Judy, we're talking CD. I mean, it's like somebody like that, where like they're willing to put in that much capital. I mean, then I can get excited about it. But other than that, I mean, if they're not willing to do that, it's hard for me to kind of get excited about a wide receiver like in that system.
Right.
With so many other established pass catchers like already there. I mean, hell, he could wind up being whoever they wind up drafting. And it's just looking at like who they have right now. He could be like the fourth option in that passing game, like behind. So you've got Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. I mean, Alshon, assuming he's healthy, so that's 3 right there. And then maybe a combination of Miles Sanders and Boston Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, so where on the pecking order would you expect this wide receiver to wind up at?
Right.
Like, I guess it depends what type of receiver they draft to. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they go out there and get a guy like KJ Hill or KJ Hamler. I doubt they're getting Ruggs. I don't think Ruggs, falls to them at 21. Well, they have, 1 second rounder, 1 third rounder, and then 3 fourth rounders. Those 4th round picks, if they don't choose to move, move those, could end up being a field stretcher to help replace Jackson. Because we saw what the offense looked like with Jackson. Yes, it was against Washington. Doesn't mean shit. But the team completely changed when they didn't have a deep threat for Wentz to push the ball downfield with. That's not RJ. That's not Whiteside's role. Jeffrey hasn't, been a speed demon since ever. So
he's always wanted contested. So
yeah,
Right.
So they didn't really have somebody to do that. So I think that if they do take a receiver, it's going to be, someone that's not going to command a lot of targets in general.
Right.
Right. Well, the return of Deshaun Jackson. I mean,
That's
that was
fair.
that was supposed to be their field stretcher. So
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it is the last year of Jeffrey's deal. So if they do go out and draft a wide receiver, it's not an indictment on anybody. It could be future planning too. You just got to look at who they pick, the type of receiver, and whether they're expected to contribute in year one, or if it could be a guy like Ruggs or Rager, or they, is somebody that might be better served not having to be shoved straight into the limelight in year one.
Mhm.
Yeah. Fair. Very fair.
The Cowboys signed Greg Zuerlein to a 3-year deal worth $7.5 million.
Greg the leg.
Greg the leg.
Legatron.
Good news for the Cowboys. Good offense. Don't expect a lot of drop off from Zuerlein. Remember, keep tuning into Beerfield Fantasy Football for all your kicker analysis, because I'm very, very for the brand. And then the Cardinals ended the whole transition tag thing. They signed Kenyon Drake to a 1-year deal worth $8.4 million. So commitment to Drake for this year, but nothing beyond.
They're gonna run him to the ground as best as they can.
Yeah, they are, and I'm here for it.
And move the fuck on. So if they may draft somebody, because they just have Chase Edmonds behind them right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make kind of a 1 year. They'll draft somebody with some upside to them, and then let Drake run it to the ground, and then just let him go next year.
That's a Cam Akers offense if I've ever seen one.
Oh my god.
Yep, that would be great. Cam Akers there would be one heck of a fit. And I totally agree, Dan. Like if you're not I guess if you don't believe in Kenyon Drake, you should be drafting the heck out of Chase Edmonds or whomever they wind up drafting this season.
I believe in Kenyon Drake. But
you should be drafting Drake plus their backup. This offense, though I think at times may look okay, it's going to probably be a beast. Just the amount of plays they run per game is going to be nuts.
It's going to be fun, and I hope they don't Cleveland it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, so many weapons, and it just winds up falling flat. And a lot of folks, I mean, we saw, Kyler and Baker, I mean, they're almost cut from the same mold in terms of like stylistically how they play, the offenses that they ran in college. So, I mean, it's not too far fetched. I mean, I just hope that that's not going to happen. But I mean, yeah, I get it. I can see it.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. That was all I had in the news since last Wednesday. Really, there's been some defensive signings and things like that. Xavier Rhodes to the Colts, I believe. Chris Harris went to the Chargers. A couple cornerback moves. But yeah, that's about it for impact signings. All right, time to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. Let's do a pick your six. Dan picked 6 questions. I picked 6 questions, and we're gonna interview the hell out of Chris.
Let's do it. Woo!
Whoa.
What's up?
Well, it wouldn't be one of our shows if there wasn't a technical difficulty. So, hey, Dan, you want to talk about something for a second while I fix this?
I'm
gonna put you on the spot.
All right, no, I got you. I may ask this a little bit later, but I thought of a question after I wrote all my questions down. Chris, who is the team that you root for the most? Like, which football team is your team?
I would say that I guess I live near Cincinnati.
Okay.
So, and I went to school, like I went to undergrad at UC. So I would say that I'm connected to the Bengals. I want to call myself an ex-Bengals fan, but like I was a Bengals fan like back when it was Ocho Cinco, when it was Chris Henry.
Oh man,
rest in peace.
Oh wow,
rest in peace, Chris Henry.
That's when I was living in Cincinnati.
Ocho
like
and T.O. on the same.
Yeah,
offense.
when they were fun and when like the team was just like you could almost feel the I guess the chance of them winning a playoff game. And like I was there. I remember living in the city when Keith Venel when Carson Palmer's ACL got snapped, and I just remember like it was just the whole city was quiet.
Yeah,
like I remember being in my dorm room and it was just the whole city was quiet, and then everybody just got hammered. Like after that, that's essentially what happened. And but it was fun to be like the franchise. I mean, ownership and that, I mean, and how terrible, Mike Brown is like aside, it's just that it was fun to root for the players.
Yeah.
And I think since that time, it hasn't been that fun. I mean, Andy Dalton really isn't somebody like, while I think he's a great guy, I mean, his foundation and all that within Cincinnati, I mean, is awesome. I think he's a good dude. It's just that the team hasn't been one worth really, I guess, investing much emotional strength into because it's just been one heartbreak after the other. And so, yeah, I mean, but now I guess I'm excited about Joe Burrow. I don't know if I should be. I mean, everything that I've read and everything that I've seen, like, makes me want to believe that this team could be something good again. But it's been difficult. I say for the past, like, probably, I want to say since about like 2010, 2011, it's just gone like sharply. I mean, look at all the guys that have like left Cincinnati
Yeah.
and become at least like contributors. Where I mean, Marvin Jones, Mo Sanu, Rex Burkhead. I mean, there have been so many like, I mean, legitimate, like Carson Palmer, for Christ's sake. I mean, like he
Yeah.
left or he retired, and then he has this resurgence under Bruce Arians, and it's like I remember that guy, but hell, that was like 5 years ago when he was playing that well.
Maybe it was Marvin Lewis. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean,
But
well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir, and
maybe
it's
it
just
was
so it's
the inability to draft a first-round lineman that could stay healthy.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, fingers crossed that
Yeah.
I mean there's some resurgence in Cincinnati, but it's been tough.
Sure. All right, let's try this again.
All right.
Pick your six.
Stupid thing told me the file wasn't available the first time. All right, Dan, you got 6 questions. I got 6 questions. We'll alternate them. We will do a break and a beer review after question 6. Go ahead with question number 1, Dan.
All right, we're gonna keep this simple. Free agency, was right around the corner. Bunch of trades, bunch of signings. A lot of value has shifted and changed. I wanted to keep these 2 first questions very open and simple to kind of just shoot the shit from who after the big free agent signings, who has become a dynasty buy, in your opinion, Chris?
For me, I guess 2 fantasy buys for me are probably, I don't know if, well, I'll throw them out there. Like, one buy for me is I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to try and buy Cam Newton like when I can.
For sure.
At least because my thought process is that, and I've been looking at some of the quarterback rankings, and since I'm over at DLF, I was scrolling through, and we right now have Cam Newton. Where the heck is he at? Because you have to scroll in order to find Cam. I mean, that's kind of the sad part. Because usually you remember seeing Cam like all the way up at the top. Right now, we've got him at quarterback 17. And when's the last time that you saw Cam Newton, quarterback 17, like ever associated, like, or ever said in the same sentence? I mean, hell, it's probably been 3 or 4 seasons, like, well, minus this past season we didn't finish it. But I mean, it's been 3 or 4 seasons, like, since we've seen Cam Newton like finish like that low. I mean, he's not even, I want to say he's not even 31 yet. I know that he doesn't have a team right now. But at least my assumption is that, I mean, worst case scenario, let's say he pulls a Carson Palmer, he retires for a little bit, gets healthy, he comes back with a vengeance, and I mean, he winds up ripping up the league as if he were, 27, 28, 29. Worst case scenario. I mean, best case scenario, I mean, he's fine. He rehabs from the Lisfranc surgery. He gets to a new team like here shortly. And then, I mean, COVID-19 and all that aside, assuming that the league continues on as it's supposed to, and like we wind up seeing him return to form sooner. Either way, I mean, that value that's presented right there to me for a guy that, I mean, we saw make it to MVP levels about four-ish seasons ago. I mean, he's somebody that I would at least want to invest in. And especially for right now, since he has been banged up, doesn't have a team, you can get him for cheaper than what you would have had to acquire him like in years past. But at least that's one guy that I'm currently trying to buy. What do you guys think about that?
I like it. I think that the logic sound. Cam Newton, when he's been healthy, has absolutely been a quarterback one, and especially in Dynasty Superflex, where quarterbacks are hard to come by. The value is going to be at an all-time low. It's basically probably going to be worth a flyer pick and a flyer player almost to get him in most scenarios. I would think, especially right now while he doesn't have a team, and there's tremendous upside to it. So you still have some teams that are saying we're not signing a quarterback, we're not signing a quarterback, we're not signing a quarterback. Somebody somewhere is going to end up with a Cam Newton on their roster and a Jameis Winston on their roster, and they're going to compete with the chance to potentially start. Newton passed his physicals, he's healthy, and the Panthers just cut him loose. Free to sign wherever for whatever, even if it's on a prove it deal. So I think he does land someplace, and I absolutely agree with the call. I think that he's not going to cost you a whole lot, and the upside is going to tremendously outweigh that, and you're not out much, even if it doesn't pan out.
Yeah, he's the perfect kind of candidate to kind of target. With him not going to a team, with him kind of being scorned, by the organization that drafted him. There's an extra, kind of, feel for him to kind of come back with a vengeance. A lot of casually competitive guys who may not be as in tune with this whole process may sell him for cheap, thinking he might be done. So I think he's the perfect, target guy where his value may seem lower than it should, and then all of a sudden, he rehabs, he comes back. Maybe he does retire for you, or maybe he does take a backup, a role where he has to compete, and he just outright wins it, and then you get him for almost nothing, in comparison to what his value will be when he signs on with somebody.
I'm just thinking here's a possible scenario. Let's say, even if it's super flex or maybe even one QB, let's say that you're probably sitting on a guy like, let's say like Matt Ryan, you already had him on your squad, and then maybe you were able to pull off the waiver wire a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick, or hell, even before he got hot, you had a guy like Ryan Tannehill, and you're able to now convert essentially like waiver wire assets into like QB1s, and that's fine. But now if you want to even now moving forward, if you want to now add even greater upside to that squad, you bring in a guy like Cam Newton that, you've already seen him attain like QB1 heights. But now you're getting him for essentially like a similar cost to what you would any of those guys. You're probably not paying, bottom dollar prices, but depending on who the owner is, what they're reading, depending on where they're looking at for information, a lot of folks are already saying that he's washed, he's not going to play again. Even if he does play, he's not going to attain the same heights that he was like 2, 3, 4 seasons ago. I still think that Cam Newton still has the juice. I still think that he, between his legs and his arm, he could still get to those QB1 numbers that he was able to do in the past. So if you're able to get him for pennies on the dollar, I think the risk, is well worth the investment. And for a lot of people's QB situations, he'd be, I think, the perfect complement to whatever situation you're sitting on right now.
I agree.
Yeah, you can, even if you don't believe that he's going to, reach the heights that he was just a few years ago, you can still pick him up for cheap, trade him, trade a smaller asset for him for cheap, and then just flip him.
Mm-hmm.
As he signs on with somebody, his value is going to skyrocket. So as he puts together that 2 to 4 week stretch, which he always does, and he ends up being a top 3 QB during that stretch, then flip him. That's what fantasy. That's why fantasy, especially Dynasty, is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you are trying to maximize value without losing too much. Without losing too much in return.
Yeah, you can almost easily see those pockets of when his value is going to spike, because the moment that he comes back and you see him, hitting some of those deeper throws or running out into the open field, it's almost like there's your window. It's open. So you should be hitting up a contender or finding somebody that's at least within that window of contention and saying hey, here, here's an asset right here, and try and flip them at that point.
Yep. You guys, do you have another one? Hopper, do you got one? Like, who's another guy?
Say Chris said he had another one. Let's let him throw that out there.
Yeah, I got another guy. I mean, he's like pretty much along that same thought process, is that like he's had like a down season, and so if you wanted to try and pick up a wide receiver one, I mean, after his like first season after switching teams, like why not try and make a run at Odell Beckham? I mean, like after the trade, and after he was going to go to Cleveland and play with Baker Mayfield. After Mayfield, he had he's now but he had the the touchdown for rookie.
Yep.
Rookie record for touchdowns in their first season. That's what I meant to say. It's the beer, I swear. Either way, I mean, he's moving on from Eli Manning. He's getting the upgrade to Baker, and then the whole team like falls flat like in 2019. Whether it's Freddie Kitchens, Baker taking a step back in his sophomore season, whatever you want to believe. I mean, Odell was injured for pretty much the entire season because it was reported that he had that that groin strain, I believe, during the preseason, and then it was muscle core injury like throughout the rest of the season. So, I mean, for him to even continue to have that 23 to 25% target share, which was still a slight step back from what he had in New York, which I think was more like 27, 28%. Still, wide receiver one target share within that offense where you have multiple other pass catchers, I think was still remarkable. And I mean, on top of being injured, I mean, he didn't really hit what we expected, but still, that's the time where you buy that dip. I mean, you have to assume that, I mean, he's not that, I mean, he's still the same wide receiver that we saw making highlight reel in New York. And if you still think that he can get that, and you still think that the offense can take a step forward, even if it is Kevin Stefanski, that we would assume I guess the assumption is that he's more predicated towards the run since he came from under Mike Zimmer. But either way, I mean, he's still going to have that like wide receiver one target share. So if you think that his value has been depressed because of his first season in Cleveland, now would be the time to make a push for him.
Sure. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I've looked at Odell and Landry both hard is potential buys just because of how far off they were from what they had traditionally performed and the levels that they had traditionally performed at in that Cleveland offense. And the question going into that was who's going to be the alpha, who's going to be the alpha, who's going to be the alpha, and we really didn't get an answer. Landry was kind of the better of the two, but since that offense never really panned out, it faltered under Freddie Kitchens. You didn't know. You throw Austin Hooper into that mix now, and there's the pieces there for that to work. So I would be trying to buy low Baker too on Cleveland pieces just in general. Give me a piece of that offense at the lower price, and Njoku also for that matter, because he's going to be almost nothing with the Hooper signing,
especially if he moves on to a different team.
Yeah, so give me the Cleveland pieces cheap, and let's see what happens. Because it's a dice roll, but it's another one of those kind of low risk, high reward dice rolls.
Yeah, I agree. Entering his prime, I mean, he's like 27, I believe. So now would be the time if you feel that your team, like if you have a contender, I mean, you're entering Odell's entering his prime. You get him for that 3-year window, and then you push it all in at that point.
Yep.
I just bought Baker for cheap, so I'm all about it. I won't say for cheap. I just bought him in a super flex league.
So I'm gonna throw a buy out there that it's kind of a bold take, and it's gonna be a person that you're gonna hope people have forgotten about. But I want to talk Damian Harris for a second. Over in New England is a guy that had the draft capital invested in him. Everybody loved him coming out of college. He checked pretty much all the boxes. The film looked good. The athleticism looked good. He lands in New England in what is traditionally an RBBC. He's hurt. He doesn't see the field. Now Tom Brady's gone. You don't have the quarterback to lean on. The defense, you still expect that to be good. We don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but there's a real possibility New England goes even more old school football than what they were playing before, with a defense and running game approach and more of a game manager quarterback situation. We saw Sony Michel fall off. He's struggled with injuries, and Damian Harris again, didn't see the field a lot. He was injured, probably fell off a lot of radars. Is a guy that stands to see some touches and has the talent to make a lot out of those touches, especially with what I believe is going to be heightened opportunity for running backs in New England. So, I'm saying go out and pay him next to nothing if you can. You might not be able to because you're only a year removed from spending higher draft capital on Harris, but it's very, very possible that, with running backs especially, you want that instant gratification. Very possible that the owner of Damian Harris has soured on Damian Harris.
I'm all about it because we talked about this a while ago with saying that Brady might potentially leave. He obviously leaves. It may shift the entire backfield. I think James White is almost next. I think it's time to try to sell White. I think his role might be shifted. They talked about wanted to move Sony Michel into more of that pass catching role, in the preseason last year. Not to say that he's going to get it, but Brady's gone. So the whole dynamic of the offense could be shifted. You bump up Damian Harris, who's built and has the pedigree of being a guy that can handle heavy workload. So you bump him up to more of the Michel role. Michel takes over potentially James White's role. Both players may find some value, in those PPR type of leagues because of the production that's there. Touchdowns might not be as high. I don't think this offense is going to be a top 12 scoring offense this year. But I think both I think both Harris and maybe even Michel are guys that you can look at buying for cheap because Michel really disappointed last year, potentially new role. It's not like he's not worth the stab in the dark because of the potential touches he could get, within this offense.
Sure.
I think I definitely agree with that move because at least from a strategic perspective, those are the guys that you want to try and invest in, right? You want to try and get some of those younger guys. Sony Michel, absolutely, he's got the receiving ability. Damian Harris, while that he wasn't known for that, at least I think he had just a little over 20 receptions, I believe, his final year in college. So, doesn't check the box, but at least that that ability is possible. But also the thing is though, for him, he's more of the quick, short area, burst quickness. That was one of his calling cards, coming out of college. Mm-hmm. So if you want to try and see if let's say if New England is thinking about I guess not necessarily moving on, but they want to try and rebuild that offense. All right, Tom's gone. They need to move on. So let's say it's Stidham's season. We want to try and reevaluate because all the pieces in that offense. Rex Burkhead is 29 years old. James White is in a similar boat, age wise.
Yeah.
Who else are you going to now try and rely on to now evaluate what that offense is going to look like post Tom Brady? Are you going to continue to try and force it to some of those older guys because they played a role and they did it well, don't get me wrong, but Damian Harris, Sony Michel, Damian Harris especially, he's that guy that you get for pennies on the dollar. You either stash him on your practice squad or you keep him towards the back end, you stash him on the back end of your roster, and then you see what happens. Because with that ability, I want to say his best comp would be a guy let's say for instance, Chiefs running back Damien Williams.
Yeah.
Yep. He would profile similarly in the fact that he can catch the ball in the backfield. He does have that burst. He does have that athleticism that, given the right situation, let's say a team comes calling during the trade before the trade deadline and wants to move for him. Who's to say Bill Belichick would be like, somebody wants to pay us for that guy? Go.
Hell, even a guy we talked about earlier, Kenyon Drake's a guy that fit exactly that mold, that had the short range quickness and the explosiveness, and even in limited carries, made himself viable, which is why the Dynasty community fell in love with Kenyon Drake in the first place, and then had that love-hate relationship with Kenyon Drake. And
absolutely.
The same type of situation.
Yeah, who's to say that, let's say that the Chargers, let's say a team like the Chargers, who's going into their season with Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson, that's their 1-2 punch, right?
Yeah.
And who's to say that either one of those guys get injured during the season? Could you not see? And they don't spend a lot because we're assuming that they're going to wind up drafting a quarterback. So most of their draft capital is going to be tied up in the quarterback position. So let's say they'd get like a day 2, day 3 running back. They need to shore up that position because as of right now, it looks like on paper that team is positioned to at least do well within their division.
Yeah.
So if you don't see them trying to make a move for a younger back that's already in the league that has that athleticism, I could see them making a move for a guy like Damian Harris. And he could vault right from practice squad or on your bench to a guy that has a legit shot at the lion's share of the touches on a good team.
Sure.
I love it.
Dan, you got any buys you want to throw out there before we move on?
No, man, we're good. We talked a lot of buys, something that our listeners know of. If we don't have, an idea for the, a show for a particular week, we'll just do buys and sells. So, let's just keep rolling on to the next question, man.
All right, Chris. So another one for you, then I'll kind of give my story here. But you mentioned home brewing. You're obviously knowledgeable about it, passionate about it. How long you been doing it? What got you started? What got you interested in going down that road?
I've been homebrewing for just about 10 years now. And what got me started? This is like kind of a roundabout story, but it was gambling.
Nice.
I got roped into a local poker game at about the same time, about 10 years ago. It was still like, fairly common. I mean, folks were still having like home games like fairly regularly. And the guy that I was going over to his house, and I would always like anytime I went down to his basement, I saw like carboys set up. I saw like buckets like lying around and just all sorts of like brewing equipment. And I was like, dude, what the heck are you doing? He was like, oh, home brewing. I was like, what? And it's like home brewing. And I was like, so what is that? He's like, well, I make my own beer. I was like, okay, that's ridiculous. But like, let me try some. If like free beer, I'm not going to say no.
Right.
Yeah. So he gave it to me and I was like, man, this is really cool. And so we spent a bunch of time together. We're playing poker and we're just sitting there, shooting the shit. And he convinces me to buy just like the Mr. Beer kit. I mean, just the basic, plastic, the plastic setup with the plastic bottles or whatever. A complete disaster, like the first time that I did it. But still, I had fun.
Right.
So we just, we start talking back and forth, and we continue talking, and it evolves from there, right? Because as soon as you start brewing, then it's just, okay, well, what if I did this? Or what if I try this? Or what if I buy this? And what if I buy this piece of equipment? And it blossoms from there. To the point where now I have kegerators sitting in there. I've got like 3 kegs sitting on my office floor. I'm brewing like once every couple of months. I'd more if I could, going to competitions. But yeah, that's essentially how I got started. And I guess the finale to that entire story is that same guy that taught me how to do everything, he owns a store, a brew supply store that I go to literally all the time.
Nice.
It's a homebrew your own beer. You can just Google it, hbyob.com. It's run by Joey Brumley. And actually it's still open even now. He's still getting supplies, and he's been working with local breweries to get grain and he's doing everything. So even if you don't live in Ohio, I know that I live in Dayton, Ohio, and a lot of folks would assume that, since it's a local store, I have to get there. No, he ships stuff everywhere. There are folks, Dayton, Ohio, so there's a Wright Pat Air Force Base that's here. So there's a lot of military folk that are here, and there are folks that have the hobby, but they've deployed elsewhere. He sent stuff to Guam. For people that,
Wow.
just they go overseas, they PCS somewhere else, and they still want to brew. They still enjoy the hobby. So if you're ever, interested in picking it up, I'd be happy to at least give you some tips. I'm definitely not the master at it. I can tell you what not to do for sure. But there's plenty of stuff that we've done videos together. We've done like instructional stuff on YouTube. We just try and have as much fun with it. So it's definitely been a passion of mine for the better part of a decade. And anybody else that's interested in doing it, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Sure. Yeah.
So awesome.
So I have I got a buddy that's been a friend of mine. So again, I picked it up last July, so not nearly as long as you've been doing it. I got a friend that I've been friends with him since I was 17 years old. It's the last 13 years now or so. who I don't even know what got him into it specifically, but he worked a lot with the guy that now runs Hand of Fate in Petersburg, which we're very familiar with. Listeners are familiar with it. We've had their beers on the show multiple times. And he kind of decided that he was just going to pick it up from the guy that runs Hand of Fate and started doing his own homebrew stuff. And, found out that I had this podcast and, that we were tasting and that we had done, several hundred beers by that point in time. And he'd used me as a taste tester. And he kept trying to tell me, he's like, dude, like, I'll teach you to brew. I'll teach you to brew. I'll teach you to brew. Whenever you're ready to do it, just let me know. And then, he decided he was going to open up his own brewery in Havana, Illinois, which is about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Springfield. And, wanted me to do web design for him and everything, honestly. So he brought me up to talk website one day, and I kind of said at that point in time, all right, I'm going to be up there anyway. We're doing it during a brew day. Teach me, I'll brew. So he actually set me up with a kettle, burner, bottling bucket, wort chiller, almost everything I needed to get started, and said, all right, here's a recipe. Here's what we're doing. Taught me how to all grain brew. And yeah, I've just kind of run with it from there. As far as, all right, I want to try this. I want to try this. I want to try this. And you learn quick, especially what not to do. And you screw a couple things up and, you kind of know, aha, this is what I did wrong. This is why the color's off. This is why the flavor's off. This is why we're overcarbonated. This is where, why the clarity isn't quite right. And, you can get stupid nerdy with this stuff into pH levels of water and water chemistry. But, the thing about it that was really alluring to me is that first day and the next one I went up there for too, it was just a fun time. It's just 4 or 5 guys hanging out in a garage with burners and their own recipes, brewing, hanging out, drinking beer, tasting beer, chatting, giving feedback and everything. And it's just a blast. It's a ton of fun. You can get into the competition side of it. That's something I wanted to get my feet wet with coming up this summer. There's a competition that goes on in Lincoln, Illinois, typically, that I wanted to kind of enter as my first competition, and that's in question now because of COVID-19. But, it's really a hobby you can take very, very far. If there's ever a beer that you've decided that, hey, maybe this would be good, the cool part is like, now I can just try to make it. I don't have to try to find somebody that does it. I can just try to make it and see if it would be good. So it really is it's a passion, and really the initial equipment cost, I mean, if you're not going super fancy temperature controlled, digital thermometer controlled kettles and everything, you can get started for a couple $100 and get everything you need to do all grain. And then after that, it's like $30 a batch.
Yep.
To do it. And that's for a 5-gallon batch, which is typically going to yield you between 30 and 40 bottles. So, you're paying more than that for 3 6-packs of craft beer just to make your own. It's a fun time.
Yeah. I mean, I could not agree more. Dan, you do it?
So I don't have any equipment. I actually went to St. Louis. I visited Chris Hopper or whatever, and he wanted me to make beer with him. It's something that I've talked about. I'm super interested in it. It's something that I want to take up as soon as things get settled down around here and we get into a different housing situation. It's always something I definitely want to do. But I went over there and we made a hoppy Irish red, and first off, it's fucking amazing. I absolutely love it. It's a favorite style of ours. And I was instantly hooked pretty much after that. It's something I have to sit on until I can make it happen. But I just love hearing you guys talk about it. So
Sure.
I haven't bought my stuff yet, but Hopper has definitely got me the edge going. So
yeah, he came down here and so I had one that we needed to bottle. You've tried both of those by now, right, Dan?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I had one that we needed to bottle, So we started off bottling it, and then we went and ran out to 3 or 4 different breweries down here just to drink. And then we came back and decided at 5 o'clock in the evening we were going to start a brew. And so I'm in an I'm in an apartment too. So like I don't even have the ability to chill very quick. Like I still have to do ice bath because I don't have because I don't have even a spigot to hook a wort chiller up to right now. So like we're sitting there dozing off on the couch waiting on this damn thing to get cold enough to where I can pitch yeast and put it in a carboy. And what we finished up probably 2 a.m. It was something stupid.
And it's not like we were drinking water and watching TV. We were doing bourbon tasting. We were still drinking beer. Like we were tuned up.
Yeah,
there you go.
So I mean, that's the best I think about home brewing is the fact that you can drink while doing it. You can taste what you're doing. It's an awesome hobby. If you want to get into it.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I think. I mean, to echo your sentiment, Chris, I think we would do the exact same thing. It would be me. It would be Joey, and then another buddy of ours that we would play poker with. We were all interested in the hobby, and on Sundays Saturdays or Sundays, or even like if it was a long weekend, we would get our stuff together, like get it start around, let's say like 11 noonish. All of our kids would get together and play. Wives would hang out. We would all have dinner around like 5, 6. I mean, we'd just be outside in his garage, just talking, laughing, brewing beer. And then, once we got a little bit closer to the time where we would need to cool everything down, that's when we would probably like pop a couple and start drinking then. But I mean, but that was like, and that was we would do it at least maybe once a month or once every other month. And it would just be an absolute blast. I mean, just talking, hanging out, listening to music. I mean, and just brewing beer. And then, a few weeks later, we'd share it with each other at the poker table and then do it all again the next month. I mean, it was just, I look forward to it every single time.
God, that sounds awesome.
And one other thing about that too, the anticipation, and we won't touch on this later actually, so I want to touch on it now. There is an anticipation after you brew something because you are waiting from, you put the recipe together, you actually brew it. I mean, you're waiting 6 to 8 weeks at minimum before that thing is conditioned and at kind of peak flavor to where you can actually taste it and see how it turned out. And even then, it's still going to change on a week-to-week basis.
Yes.
So,
I mean, especially because you guys are doing like what, Irish Reds and stouts,
hoppy
porters?
Irish Red. I done a stout. There's a porter in right now. Done a couple ales. So yeah, it takes a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. Those take a little bit, and you're kind of you're waiting, and that level of anticipation. It's just like you want to make sure. I mean, and you'll see this like once you get into like the competition realm. I mean, there are guys that you'll come across that. I mean, they get real deep into the science,
right?
I mean, and they will track. I mean, everything. I mean, they have. I mean, the fermentation chambers that they'll have set up. I mean, they will start arguing about yeast strains. I mean, the proper yeast strain to use for the style. I mean, they will get into like yeast cell count. If they can taste any esters, like in the beer, like once they get it. I mean, there are hints. I mean, I actually I think it was the first competition I went to. This was maybe 2 years ago, and I gave a guy a sample of my beer, and he cold called the hops that I used in it,
which is incredible.
That's so awesome.
And I was just like, holy, all right. So this is like I mean, I'm playing a completely different game than what you guys are playing right now.
Right.
I'm having fun, but this is on a completely different level, and this is just awesome. Like I hope I get to that point, but this is awesome.
We ain't there yet.
He took like 2 sips of it, and he was like, okay. So you've got so what is that? Is that Galaxy? It's like that's a little bit of that's okay. Some in late edition Citra. I was like,
jeez, how did you do that? Yeah.
And I think I'm okay with like guessing hops, but damn,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he just he hit it exactly, and I was just like, "Oh, okay, so I lost. Like, I'll just walk away. I'll just walk away."
All right. Let's get into some sells. Dan, I'll let you kick off this question because I need another beer.
Okay.
I ran out already.
All right. So, we just talked about the bias when we were getting, with the last football question. We got to go naturally, we got to go to the other side. So, Chris, who is a guy or, multiple guys that you are deeming as dynasty sells after the free agency period?
So I think the best way to kind of preface this is get into like the strategic portion behind it.
Yep.
So like my thought process, like when looking at sells or B guys that, all right, well their value has peaked, or even if they might be ascending, it's hard for me to say one way or the other whether or not like they're going to continue to ascend or if they are actually peaking at this point. So I think like one guy that like I've been kind of like I've been trying to sell or at least testing the market on was a guy that we'd already discussed, and that's Kenyon Drake. I mean, for what you picked him up for, which you could have picked him up off the waiver wire or acquired him for like essentially nothing or as a throw in some trades like 1, 2, 3 years ago. I mean, this could have been, I mean, he could have been sitting on your bench and then all of a sudden he gets traded to Arizona and then pow. I mean, he is the guy on an offense that's piloted by like one of like at least from a dynasty standpoint, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now. So it's just, he would be a guy that I would be least interested in finding out like what anybody in your league would be willing to pay for him. I received an offer in one of my leagues yesterday where I have him. It was the 106 plus I think it was 106 plus a 2021 second, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I mean that's great. I want more for that, but at least that's a good I got a good gauge for what he's worth. Now,
Yeah.
if I can get more in that, and like I'm considering a counter right now, if I can get more for that, great. Like if I can get something along the lines of 2021 first, or even like a significant addition to like my wide receiver group, because in that league I'm kind of hurting for wide receivers, that'd be great. But at least like if we're already talking about a guy that you basically paid nothing for, that already has like first round, like 2020 first plus value, then that's great. I mean, that would be a guy that I'd be interested in selling at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a smart move. If you're not a team that's looking to compete, Drake is really just a 1-year guy. I mean, both Hopper and I are huge Drake fans. He was vastly underused with Adam Gase in Miami.
Mhm.
He finally leaves, gets traded to Arizona last year. Then he smashes within that Cardinals offense, and it seems prime. They only signed him to a 1-year deal this year. So, as we talked about earlier, he's someone that they're going to probably use and abuse and then let go. He's already 26 years old, so he's reaching that age. He's reaching the age apex where you want to start to think about getting out of him. Fantastic for redraft. I would love to cash in if I owned him in anywhere.
Mhm.
But as right now, I 100% agree. As much as I love Kenyon Drake, there are a lot of people out there that also love him and want to pay for him because they believe that he is the running back of the future, and I'm not there yet.
Right. I think I'm there as well, because I mean, if you think about their current, like the Cardinals' current situation, it's him and Chase Edmonds.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but Chase Edmonds doesn't profile as an RB2 with RB1 upside. And that's what you would expect. I mean, he doesn't profile like a guy like, let's say, like Alexander Madison. Whereas if Dalvin Cook goes down, like we believe that Alexander Madison could pick up that load like without too much of an issue, and then it's just Alexander Madison and whomever's sitting behind him.
Yep.
I don't see them instantly turning to Chase Edmonds and saying like, Chase, you're the dude, you're getting the lion's share of the touches, and that's the end of it. I feel, I mean, it would make the most sense to me that they either invest in the draft, or they sign a free agent. If they don't invest, let's say, I mean, a guy like, while it wouldn't make too much sense to me, but I mean, there's guys like Devonta Freeman that are still out there in free agency that they could go and pick up. I mean, there's a chance that it's going to be, I would assume it's going to be not just those two dudes, like heading into the 2020 season. So if you think that, I mean, as great as we think Kenyon Drake is, I think it would be great to try and see like what his value is and what you can get in return for him right now.
Yeah, 1000% agree.
I'm with you.
Chris, you got any thoughts? You want to add anything on to the to Kenyon Drake sell?
Not necessarily into the Kenyon Drake sell, no. I'm one of the guys that did buy Kenyon Drake for next to nothing, and now I have him at high value, but that's on a team that's also expected to, compete for a championship this year. So, in that scenario, I'm not necessarily going to run out and sell him. I'm going to try to ride that wave, especially as it's a team that is thinner at running back, to where I don't necessarily have the depth at that position to sell him off. But I agree with the take completely, 100%. As always, and with most takes, the thing to keep in mind is that takes are situational. You've got to be in a situation to be able to do that. And, there could be people in a situation like me where, hey, maybe you're not. And there's nothing wrong with trying to ride Kenyon Drake in that sense. But if you get to midseason, like if I get to midseason and Kenyon Drake is going off and absolutely killing it, and, it's an IDP league, so let's say my defense hasn't carried my offense, and I'm middling, then yeah, I'm going to sell. And, there's no harm in, if you're a rebuilding team that landed Kenyon Drake as a throw-in maybe on a previous sell, there's no harm in flipping that at high value either.
Not at all. So I'll throw a guy out there. He's one of my favorite football players. He was a part of my favorite football team, and I'm talking about Stefon Diggs. He becomes a sell. It depends, because most people are on board with him likely not seeing the type of volume that he's gonna, that he would have gotten in Minnesota. Moves on to a team in Buffalo that should be in the same position as Minnesota was last year. As a team that should compete to win the AFC East, they are, I believe, favored to win it. I think Vegas has bumped their win total up to almost, I think, 9.5 at this point, with Brady leaving New England. So you have a team in Buffalo that should be more of a run first. I do expect them to draft a running back to complement Devin Singletary. They have a top 10 offensive line. They're going to have a top 7, if not higher, defense, and a very erratic quarterback in Josh Allen. Well, the target share may be there for Diggs this year. It should. What we've seen historically, especially after the last 4 or 5 years, like even the elite receivers can struggle when they move teams. We talked about Odell. He struggled last year. Sammy Watkins struggled, both times. His move to the Rams a few years ago, and now his move to the Chiefs. For him to find, a footing in the fantasy community. So there's a risk when you want to try to buy a guy like Diggs when he switches teams. And we know that Josh Allen isn't a great passer, especially compared to Cousins. To me, Diggs became a sell. You might find fans out there that want to invest into him now. He should be the number one. The competition for targets shouldn't be as bad as it would have been with a healthy Thielen. So for me, it's pain as it may say, because I bought into Diggs last year thinking that he would have been around a lot longer. Diggs is now a sell to me.
Sure. I want to piggyback on that. You mentioned wide receivers and elite receivers going to different teams and maybe not quite being as good. And this is going to be another bold take that I might get eviscerated for, but Nuke Hopkins. He's going from a team where he was the guy to a team where he's not the only guy there. It's not DeAndre Hopkins in 3 games of Will Fuller and then he pulls a hammy. It's DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald and Kenyon Drake. And yes, it's high volume, but if, again, you're in a position to potentially sell, you can sell DeAndre Hopkins for a haul right now, because the hype of him being in Arizona is going to take off more so than it has already. And the problem there is, like Dan mentioned, we've seen elite wide receivers struggle when they switch teams, but you talk target share with Diggs, the target share for Hopkins, I'd be surprised if it's what it was in Houston. over in Arizona with the amount of mouths that they have to feed there, and the fact that Kyler Murray's a quarterback that gets it done on the ground too, in addition to what they have in Kenyon Drake. So, it's elite receiver, new place, a lot of mouths to feed, and I couldn't fault you if you went out and tried to sell DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm even gonna, maybe lean towards it a little bit.
I mean, Hopkins is what, 27 years old right now?
Yeah, he's also getting into his prime.
He's reaching that level where that 27 to 29 range, where they're in the top of their prime, going into the back end of their twilight years. Hopkins does have the skill set to be.
Does have the skill set to play deep.
Yep, to play
into his 30s.
Like he should be the next. If there's Gerald who can switch into more of that just slot, that full-time slot receiver. But we speak volume with the Cardinals. Murray averaged was 17th in attempts or in pass attempts per game. So the volume may actually be less. There's no vacated targets. There's not a lot of vacated targets in Arizona. So if you think Hopkins is going to smash as a top 5 receiver, you have to think that he's going to eat so much into Kurt and Fitz and Drake, and then anybody else that they decided to draft, because they even talked about wanting to draft more receivers onto this team. You have to believe that he can, take so much away. And while Hopkins has proven to do that, like, this is the most competitions he's had since his rookie season with Andre Johnson. So it wouldn't surprise me if Nook falls from that 30% target range to 25%, on a team that was right about average in passing attempts per game.
Yeah.
He may not be a wide receiver one. Like, to me, that's not a hot take.
No.
To me, that's like looking beyond the numbers and seeing that you may need to fade Hopkins, especially in redraft this year.
Well, and you said it earlier too. Well, I think it was you. It might have been Chris. I don't remember. Somebody said it earlier that the point of Dynasty and what part of what makes it fun is you also want to try to sell people at peak value. And we might be exiting a range where Hopkins is in that elite top 3 tier wide receiver, where he's still a wide receiver 1, and he's still consistently in the 6 to 10, 6 to 12 range or whatever. But, is he going to peak in that top 3 wide receiver range again? Is he going to land there, or is this a chance to sell him at, potentially peak value for what he is? So, it's just a thought. It is a little bit of a hot take, a little bit bold, but he is a guy that comes to mind that I look at it and I say, yeah, here's a take a lot of people probably aren't going to give that makes sense.
Yep. You got any thoughts on this, Chris? You got anything you want to add to?
No, I mean, echoing both of your statements. I mean, you've got. It's slightly different though, I guess, for the way that both of those guys produce. So let's focus on DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins hasn't had less than 150 targets in I think like 4 or 5 seasons.
Right.
Yep.
But last season, there was no pass catcher that had more than 110 targets. So, I mean, how do you reconcile like those two things?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Larry Fitzgerald had like just short of 110 targets. Christian Kirk, I want to believe, had just over 100 targets. I mean, and now we're going into an offense where, I wholeheartedly agree that, Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, for as much as everybody wants to point to, it's the air raid 4 wide pass all the time system. Well, 1, that didn't work out all that much like last season. And 2, even if you do want to say that, well, now they have at least 3 good wide receivers, and we'll throw in Hakeem Butler, Andy Isabella as that fourth wide receiver. I mean, their defense has gotten better.
Yep.
They're not going to be in as many negative game scripts as they were in 2019. So negative game scripts is what correlates the most to increased pass attempts. I mean, teams they step on the gas when they need to catch up, and their most efficient way in order to do that is through the pass. So if they're not going to be in passing situations as much in 2020 because their defense is better, then there's no way that DeAndre Hopkins is going to get to that requisite target count that has maintained him as a wide receiver 1 since Like let's say for as long as we've included him in that wide receiver one conversation.
And
It's just hard for me to see him getting there.
But you know what really hasn't gotten better? The offensive line, which is when Kyler Murray is going to run for his life. So and
you're going to sell Hopkins now, and then you can buy him next year for cheap. Year 2, probably no fits,
and still probably end up with a net gain.
Yep, and established chemistry with Murray. So yeah, I'm all aboard that take.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm definitely with that. Now for Stephon Diggs, I think it's slightly different because Diggs has the slightly higher ADOT. So for Josh Allen, like where that works for him are those deeper passes. So like, sure, you've got John Brown still in the mix. But I mean, if you take away like some of those other guys that were kicking around over in Buffalo, like Isaiah McKenzie, Duke Williams, like, so on and so forth, like you get rid of those guys and if you were just to focus that core to John Brown, Stephon Diggs, and Cole Beasley. All right. And then let's throw Dawson Knox like too.
But what about Robert Foster?
No, let's forget Robert Foster. No, we're not doing that anymore.
I love Dawson Knox.
We tried it for 2 seasons. It didn't work. And I mean, rest in peace, Robert Foster. I mean, that's it.
I do love Dawson Knox though, so thank you for including him.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if we can at least say that all 3 of those guys can get around a 20% target share, that's not that bad for Stephon Diggs. To be quite honest, that's not a death knell for Stephon Diggs. I mean, he's relied on those like higher ADOT like type passes for most of his career. Like since Adam Thielen became more prevalent and Stephon Diggs was kicked to the outside and Adam Thielen was moved into the slot, I mean, he's relied on some of those deeper targets. And Josh Allen is that guy, that has the ability in order to hit some of those deeper passes. Erratic passer, yes, but for Stephon Diggs to make value, we don't need a high percentage of those passes in order to hit. So it could be that, Stephon Diggs can maintain his value moving to Buffalo. I mean, first year, new offense, I can understand that, some growing pains. But let's say in 2021, if he's still maintaining like that level of target share within the offense, and I think his talent as a separator, his talent as a route runner can help him do that, then I think he should be able to maintain his value. With DeAndre Hopkins, I think it's slightly different because that offense works differently. Yeah. But with Diggs, I think that it's possible for him to maintain his value in 2021, at least.
So it's almost in the same vein where both Hopkins and Diggs, you may not need to, to sell Diggs. You can definitely sell Hopkins. You can buy both players next year, especially Diggs. Especially if I'm not looking at the contract situation with Cole Beasley or John Brown. But if that changes and Diggs does become the de facto go-to guy on all 3 levels of that offense, because Buffalo's going all in. This is their all in. They recognize that the AFC East is up for grabs. It should be there. It's definitely not the Jets. It's definitely not the Dolphins. It's definitely not the Patriots potentially. It should be there. So there's a definite case to be made that that Diggs may not live up to whatever hype he may get with the team in year 1, but in year 2 he could smash, and it is definitely somebody that you can look into if you're a team that's not competing this season. You can invest in hopes that in 2021 that value really pays off then.
Yeah, John Brown is 29 years old. Stephon Diggs is 26 years old. In 2021, who do you think is going to have more value? Right. To me, that at least that presents itself as a buying opportunity. Now, if you want to sell right now because his value is dropping, I totally understand that. But like moving forward, so let's say in 2021, that team moves on from John Brown. Let's say even if he's there, a speedy wide receiver at 30 years old, how effective do you think he's going to be in 2021?
Well, Josh Allen's only entering year 3. So let's say he continues to progress as a passer, also continues to get more consistent, continues to reel it in, because you did see some of that progression from year 1 to year 2. You know, that's also going to hurt that sell argument a little bit down the road.
Right.
So
both John Brown and Cole Beasley, they're both sitting around 29, 30 years old. So Stephon Diggs could be like the only game in town within the next couple of years.
And Cole Beasley isn't long for this long term. He's got a rap career to think about.
That's true. Yeah. The bees, man.
Yeah. Flip kind of argument. Real quick. If Josh Allen does struggle this year, I don't think he's a slam dunk from an NFL standpoint to be a long term. This is their year. This is what people expect them.
He's got big hands and looks good in shorts. That's all you need.
That's all you need to know.
100%.
That situation could change. I'm not saying for next year, and I'm not saying that Diggs is a slam dunk sell. It's just the offense, and it's like, to me, the situation on paper as of right now, it didn't get any better.
Sure.
Just because I expect Minnesota's defense to struggle this year. If you would have said in Minnesota, I think it would have been, fantastic, because I expect the Vikings to throw more.
Me too. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna call a little bit of a show audible here because we already touched on Cam Newton.
Yep.
So I'm gonna ask two questions back to back here. We're gonna switch over to Homebrew, ask 4 and 6, and then we'll hit a beer review. So first question: Did you? And I think we kind of already touched on this too. Did you go straight to all grain, or did you start out with extract brewing? And let's just kind of chit chat about the differences between the two and really the different types of home brewing people can go into.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I start out with extract. Yeah. The Mr. Beer kit. I remember like getting those, tall, tubs of malt and trying to, make some beer out of it. Actually, and I don't know, I mean, if you didn't do this, Chris, don't make fun of me, but did you ever taste like the extract? Have you ever done that?
No, I've not tasted extract. I actually got dumped straight to all grain. So I haven't even messed with extract.
I've been around it enough where it was just like you taste it, like I've tasted a little bit. It's kind of like it's syrupy.
Right.
And it was just like I wanted to try it. And it's like, oh, it's not that bad. I started off with extract brewing. And that was one of the reasons why I could tell you a lot of things like not to do. Like what not to do is just take the extract and then dump it straight into your pan because it's not warm. And because since it's light syrup, it will drop straight to the bottom of your pot and then scorch it. Don't do that. You'll wind up with a bunch of smoke in your house if you do it that way. And I've done that before. So, but I think it taught me a lot about, just the basics behind brewing, like the fundamentals of brewing,
sure,
like the things that you're supposed to expect, and then also like in calculating or even measuring gravity readings and bottling, so on and so forth. But then the things that I learned as I was converting from extract to all grain was why folks switched to all grain. Well, because there's a lot of extra price that's included when you do just extract brewing, because that step of when you have the extract, that's what you're doing with the very first portion of all grain, where you're steeping your grains.
Yep.
You're getting most of those sugars out of those grains, like right there. So the cost difference in buying extract versus getting the same grain bill and like doing it the all grain method is cheaper. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll try to do it this way. Like, while it sounded a bit more complicated and it sounded a bit more, I guess, daunting to switch to all grain, like once you get into it, at least you understand the science behind it, it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. But it was one of those things where I bought the kit, I learned the extract way. And so trying to do home brewing a different way, it just took me a minute to wrap my mind around, I guess, the different processes that went behind it. But then after I watched a couple of times, the friend that I had, Joey, he showed me, at that point, he was already doing extract brewing. And so like he had shown me, he had done, he had a false bottom kit. He had a mash tun that had just like the stainless braid like down at the bottom. They had done like a whole bunch of other like different like random like DIY type setups. And so like he had shown me just like the basics behind like constructing your own tun and all that. I wound up making my own. So it's just like once you get interested in it and you want to try and learn like literally the nuts and bolts of it, that's where you'll start to venture out a bit more. And that's where I found it to be the most fun after that.
Yeah. So for our listeners, the path Chris took is typically the path most people will take. They'll start out with extract brewing because, well, it's fewer steps. It's a little bit easier. and then eventually convert to all grain, lower cost, a little bit more control over the not necessarily the base grains, but some of the adjunct grains and stuff that you get to use in it, and a little bit more control over the recipe. I was dropped straight to all grain just because everybody that was teaching me already knew all grain, and I'm sure that that's created a little bit different learning curve for me that we're still working our way through. But those are the two primary methods. There are other things like brew in a bag and things like that, but most people will start out with the extract, which are you can order the extract kits and everything online and start out that way, and then graduate to all grain, if you will. I got skipped a grade, and we're learning on a curve. So the other question I had here, and this is something I'm actually really interested to talk to you about, especially because you've been doing it a while. But when for your recipes, where do you draw inspiration from that? And then what's your process when putting together a recipe? Because I know what my process is, but I'm curious if I can incorporate anything here.
Sure. Let's see. My inspiration is what I like, and what I like I generally get from going out to other bars, like local breweries. I'm kind of fortunate. I know that you mentioned Hand of Fate. I'm gonna have to try and see if I can find them at some point. I don't know if they distribute out my way, but I do have I have family in St. Louis. I'm gonna see if
I am in St. Louis. It's up by Petersburg, but I will DM you after the show because or Dan will or we'll group chat this, and definitely not see about sending you some.
Okay, I would love to send you guys. I mean, so anything from any of our local breweries, or hell, I'll send you a growler of my own stuff that I have in my house.
Okay, if the Midwestern Expo goes on again,
I'll have like my plan, my whole goal for the expo. And I think I already mentioned it to Bob, like the last time that we went out and had lunch, was that I was going to have at least probably 5 or 6 just like small growlers just like with me at our booth.
We wanted to, and we had asked him about that last year, and kind of got, it was they weren't sure with liquor licenses and sales and things like that. We didn't want to sell. We just wanted to bring things for sampling, but I guess there's a certain liability that went along with it. But we're trying to stay on brand with it. But we asked about that last year.
Yeah, like I want to have it. I mean, I just want to because I had a couple other buddies that were there, and I wanted to send it home with them. And like I don't know about drinking on premise, but at least give it to you guys. And if you drink it out in the parking lot, I had no idea that happened. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, but we can talk after. But at least make something happen.
100%. Let's do that.
Yeah.
But for other inspirations, I mean, it's just what I like. And I'll normally I'll have a beer, and I'll be like, okay, so like, what is this? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What is this color? I think literally I got the inspiration for this latest batch that I'm brewing is because I saw a picture of, and I never had it before, but it's from Treehouse Brewery. It's their Orange Julius.
Yes.
I've seen pictures of it. I 100%. I don't care like how bad this is of me as like a craft brew lover, but if I see like a beer, it could be the absolute worst beer, but if it has good can art, I will probably buy at least 1 6-pack because I have to have the can, or I have to have the bottle.
I'm guilty of some of that.
It's awful. But I mean, whoever works in marketing, they got me. Like, they know how to sucker me into spending, $10-15 on their horrific beer, because it needs to have a good design on it.
Yep.
But for Orange Julius, I saw a picture of it, and I just loved that, like the color of it. I mean, it just looked exactly like an orange, and I was just like, I want to make something that looks and tastes like an orange. Like, how do I do that? I literally I took a picture of it, I sent it to Joey, and I was just like, how do I make this? And he was like, oh, okay, well, it sounds like this is the style. So then just start tweaking it from there. So I found this hazy IPA recipe, and I've just slowly started molding it into that. And it's just, okay, well, all right, so it needs to have fruity aromas. Okay, so then what would normally go with that? Okay, well, that's normally like Galena, that's Citra,
Right.
that's Galaxy. I mean, that's some of those hops. Okay, well then, how would you want to get that flavor to it? Okay, well those are later edition hops. Those are Whirlpool hops. If you want to do the aroma, that's maybe some dry hopping like that's added into that. Okay, so I need to change my process. I need to change my hop schedule. So it's finding those components of a beer that you really enjoy, and then for me, it's just been reverse engineering that into, okay, well, what do I have to change about a recipe so I can get that thing? Like if I want to find a beer that's absolutely crystal clear, because I think a lot of people, at least that I've seen and that I've talked to, and especially judges, some of it, like the clarity, like how it looks, a lot of people will judge it just on how it looks.
Right.
So if you want that clarity, okay, well, what do I have to do for clarity? Okay, a lot of people are putting in like Werflock tablets using Irish moss.
Yep.
They're cold crashing their beers. I mean, they're doing all these things in order to boost clarity. Okay, so for an ale or for an Irish red, for a lager, all right, so maybe I'll try and do like all of these things in order to make it look like that thing that I'm trying to hit. But then for hazies, obviously doesn't matter because I'm just going to throw a bunch of shit in there anyway.
Right.
But I mean, that's been my inspiration. It's like I'll see or taste something, and then I'll just ask the question, like, how do I get that thing? Not how do I make this beer? How do I get that thing out of that beer that just really just maybe like look at the glass, just be like, oh, this is really good. And then I just kind of reverse engineer it from there, and then I'll just make a recipe around that thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, first off, clarity, and then I'm gonna to bridge back to kind of my process. So that was one of the things with the hoppy Irish red that we just brewed, is it came out hazier than I wanted it to. It did not come out with a ton of clarity, and there's a reason for that. One is that I knew I was going to see Dan, so I probably took it out of the fermenter sooner than what I should have. Didn't give it as much time to settle out. But it had that problem with a couple other beers too. So, actually, the one I just brewed, I did throw a Werflock tab in at the end to see if we can get it to clear up a little bit. And, I've been more focused on flavor above anything else right now, but I do know when you get to competition that clarity and color is actually going to matter too. A lot. So trying to get that to clear up. And for the listeners out there, Werflock tabs and Irish moss, basically what those do, you toss them in at the end of a boil, and they will help the protein settle out during fermentation and kind of all settle to the bottom of your primary fermenter. And then, when you rack it to secondary or rack it for bottling, you're not bringing a lot of that haze along with you because it's all settled out. So
yeah,
that's basically what those are for. Now, so my recipe, whereas you reverse engineer, I kind of try to engineer, and it's interesting that we take a little different approach to this. So, I came up. So I got to start with this actually, and I kind of have a sense. I learned to cook at a super young age, and I've always, and I don't know what it is, kind of had a sense even with cooking to where I'm not necessarily a straight recipe cooker. It's take a recipe and it's just been, oh, I can add this, do this, modify this, and it's going to taste better, or it's more going to fit my taste, or it's more going to fit what I want to do. Or I can sit there and think, when I want to cook, hey, this sounds good. How am I going to make this happen? Or these flavors would go good together. How am I going to make this happen? Yeah, you do draw inspiration from some other breweries, but there's been other things I'm just like, those flavors go good together. Let's try this. And then what I'll typically do is I will then get into kind of reverse engineering, kind of not, I guess. I'll go out to the internet and I'll use the online resources that are there, and I will pull between 5 and 8 different recipes, a couple from the base style of what I'm trying to do, and then a couple that are exactly what I'm trying to do. And I'll be looking at things like hop schedule, what hops are they using, what grains are they using, how much grain are they using, and then I'll take that and painstakingly just kind of gloss over, I got it bookmarked, a list of hops and a list of grains, and say, okay, what do I want to change here? What do I want to modify here? What elements do I want to take from here, and here? So it's not completely engineering from scratch. It's more like, all right, let me take elements from recipe 1, 2, 3, and 6, and then change this and throw my own spin on this. And let's see, this hop sounds like it would be better for this particular beer than this one, and swap all of that out and then end up landing on something. And then I'll text the guy that taught me and say, I'm thinking about doing this. Here's what I got. And he'll usually have something like, oh, I've done something similar. Here's what it is. Or, do this instead of this. And, we land someplace and we try it. And then it'll come out. And again, because I'm still early on in the process, or early on in the learning curve. So it's like, what I've brewed so far has just been my first go at various recipes. So then it comes out. How did it come out? What do I need to change? And then how am I going to change it or modify it for that next go around?
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that 100% makes sense. And actually, there was one of my old roommates in college. His dad first off was he was a chemistry professor at the University of Cincinnati, but he was also an avid homebrewer. Go figure. But he would literally have chemistry equipment that he converted into brewing equipment, massive beakers, just filled with yeast starters.
That is awesome.
Yeah, he would turn large some larger carboys that they had for chemicals into carboys for beer. But he had been doing it for so long. He had been doing it since the 80s. He knows Charlie Papazian. He's met some of those guys, some of the grandfathers of homebrewing and what we know homebrewing to be. And one of the things that he told me when I first started, he was just just brew. Just get in and just start doing it. It's all about failing. It's all about learning. It's all about making mistakes, and you pick up on the nuance as you go. Because for the most part, unless you completely screw up a batch and you infect it, or
it's gonna be drinkable.
It comes out sour. You're gonna drink it, right? Yeah. It's 5 gallons of something that you're going to drink and or pawn off on your buddies when they come over.
Yeah, and it may not be exactly, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit in a later question I have, but it may not be exactly what you wanted it to turn into or what you've dreamt up.
But you know what you need to do in order to make it that.
Right, and
at least you have an idea.
And it's generally going to be drinkable. And I will say this, I have not yet, 7 batches in, had one that's undrinkable yet. So
I have. I've had one.
Yeah. So I was close. I was real close. I'll tell that story here in a little bit. So all right, let's go ahead and hit a beer review, and then we'll get back to a football question and pull the back end of the show. As soon as I find the drop, this is a common thing.
Beer review.
All right, Dan, it's been a minute since we've heard the supple sounds of your voice, so why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
We might be at a record to, from showtime to beer review in almost about 2 hours.
Hour and 45 minutes, yeah.
By the way. Anyways, so for our listeners out there that have either skipped ahead or has totally listened to the entirety of this episode, at regular speed and forgot what I'm drinking. I'm drinking Belladonna. It's a barrel-aged imperial stout from Abandoned Building Brewing. It's from one of our listeners, Clint. This is the last beer that we will have featured from the show that's from them. Again, this isn't, this is a very base barrel aged. There is no adjuncts added, so it's very boozy. You get the subtle hints of chocolate, subtle hints of dark fruit. I don't know how long the barrel was aged or beer was aged for in the barrels or the barrels that they use, which particular bourbon they use for this. It does not say in the can, and you did not give us a footnotes for that. But as a 12.9% barrel age, it's going to hit you. The nose in itself gives off that, gives off the booziness to it. You get a little bit of that roastiness to it, a little bit of that chocolate to it on the mouthfeel. It's the exact same. And as the beer is warmed up, you will notice that that the booze sticks, or that the that boost taste tends to stick out more. So it's been absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite styles of beers, even though it's a bit on the more expensive side as a beer drinking hobby. So I've been a huge fan. I've been a huge fan of the beers that Clint has recommended and has not given to us. Great job, Abandoned Brewing.
All right. I had exit strategy from Four Hands for those that don't remember because it's been forever since we started this thing. It's a sour IPA with lactose, peach, and vanilla. So more of a sour milkshake. So color, we're really pale, very, very hazy. Definitely some sediment floating in there. As you drink it, you start off, there's a little bit of hoppiness up front. It came out more in the first can I drank because it wasn't quite as cold as it needed to be. But the hoppiness in really the warmer it gets is when the IPA starts to show out in it, and you do get grapefruit, kind of citrus, tropical notes to it, which in some degrees clash a little bit with the peach. But overall, when it's at the correct temperature, those really take a back seat. The peach doesn't necessarily show up a whole heck of a lot flavor-wise. There's a subtle little bit of it on the finish, but the sourness and kind of the tartness definitely does. And really, the lactose and the vanilla really give this thing a nice kind of full, almost creamy mouthfeel all the way through with a real subtle sweetness to it. So overall, it's been a very, very pleasant drinker, hence why I'm, through a can and a half or a pint and a half of it already. Also, but yeah, Four Hands did a really, really good job with this one. And Chris, do you want to review your own beer? We don't force our guests to do a review, but
I mean,
you're more than
I'll
welcome
at least
to.
say this. I mean, because I need to go grab some more. I'm on E, fellas. But I will say that for this one, there were two things, and when I posted this up on Saturday, when I started brewing, I guess version 2.0 of this recipe, there are two things. One, the color, and I've added in some acidulated malt. Which has a slightly higher SRM, which should give me a deeper orangish color, because this one came off more yellowish, yellow orange, somewhere in there. And so there was that. So I'm hoping that will change here on this next go around. Two, also head retention was pretty low. I have my kegerator, the regulator, on the fridge, I think is set to just over 12 psi, which is actually kind of high. So when this comes out, it comes out super foamy, but head retention is really low. So I added in some carapils for this in order to help with that. So those are two things I'm hoping is fixed on this next batch. But since it's been about 6-7 weeks since I kegged this one, all of the most of the aroma is essentially gone.
Yeah.
I mean flavor is still there for the most part. Bitterness is still mostly there. But most of the aroma that you would get from something that had as much dry hops and late hop additions as we had, it's just not there anymore. It's still a good beer, but it's this is something that you drink within the first couple of months. So other than that, I think it's still pretty good.
All right.
Right on.
Yep, and some good some notes in there for our listeners about malt and SRM. SRM is a way to basically to measure color. There's some good calculators out there online that will kind of sort of tell you based on what grains, what color you're going to end up with, but higher SRM, a little bit deeper color. And Carapils is one of Chris mentioned it, but it is a malt that you basically just add in for head retention. So
I should have done that on the first go around, but oh well.
Oh well. It happens,
Yeah.
It happens.
All right. Dan, why don't you go ahead and kick off with question 7, and we'll try to move through this back half a little quicker than the first 2 hours of the show. I love
so,
it.
Speaking of, I wanted to speed things up. We're just going to combine questions 7 and 9
Sure.
to make things a little bit easier and a little bit quicker here. So I want you guys to tell me your favorite rookies. It doesn't have to be, one position, just your favorite rookies that you want to target in that first round. And then give me a couple or one guy, whatever, that you want to target, in the back end of your draft, the guy that you want in that maybe late second to like late fourth round, like a guy that you think that you can sit on for, a year or two in your taxi squad, and hopefully he just blows up or pans out. And we'll start off with Chris here.
Okay. So let's see, for an early round guy, I would say like 2 early round guys that I want to try and take away from my draft. So if I'm in the first round, and let's say if I have at least like, let's say top 5 draft capital, I have to walk away with CeeDee Lamb. I have to, and this is me. I mean, Jerry Jeudy's, great receiver. Don't get me wrong. But I think after I watched quite a bit of Kyler Murray before he came out, and if it wasn't, and it was fun to watch because at the same time I was trying to get some more information on Hollywood Brown, and trying to see like, okay, well, like where did this guy come from, like Marquise Brown in particular. And if it wasn't Hollywood Brown that was like streaking off, like running for a touchdown, it was that guy CeeDee Lamb that was like coming right behind him and doing a lot of the work as well. And I was just thinking like, and this was 2 years ago, and it was like, man, that guy right there, he's going to be a great wide receiver. Like when he comes out, and lo and behold, like here we are. And I just think from the size, sure, he didn't run like as quickly as folks like projected him to, but I still think he checks enough boxes that I'm hoping that the draft capital and the landing spot meet my hope as in terms of what he can achieve as an NFL wide receiver. By the way, like he's definitely one of those guys that I'm aiming for. I normally I lean wide receiver heavy. especially in Dynasty, like early round. I guess top 3 pick most likely should go to a running back because of how long their window is. But for wide receivers, if I'm in the 104, 105, 106, like somewhere in there, sure, I'd be more than happy to pick up a guy like him. Jalen Reagor, another guy that it's just, my God. The amount of targets that he was able to command like in college, along with again that athleticism, that body control, that ability to, like that contested catch ability. Sure, again, he didn't hit that. He didn't hit the, I guess, that threshold that we would expect for a wide receiver on the speed category. But my God, I think that there's enough for him as a route runner that I really don't care about if he ran, what was it, 4.5? I don't care at that point. Like
4.47.
Yeah,
4.47. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't care at that point. Give me a receiver of his type with good draft capital in a good situation, and I will draft him like all day long. And just like those 2 guys, like for sure. Like I want to walk away with at least one of those guys in my draft.
All right, looking at the front end for me, I'm going to give 2 wide receivers and a running back, obviously, depending on where I pick in the first round. Denzel Mims is a guy that I really like and kind of want to target, not in that first 4 or 5 picks, but kind of mid-first. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he checks all the boxes athletically, and then when you watch his film, he's a guy that I thought found a way to win in different ways. He could beat you off the line. He could use technique to beat you, which is something I really like to see in wide receivers, not just on his release, but also within his route running. He had very, very good positioning and good hands to go along with that athleticism. He's a guy that isn't catching quite the hype as what CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, even T. Higgins is, but I think has all of the traits and all of the college productivity and checks all the boxes in what I saw on film to actually come in and produce at a high level. And then a guy that I'd like to personally get and maybe overdraft a little bit at the end of the first round is Devin Duvernay. I've talked about him on the show before. I'm going to talk about him again. The 100 reception guy in college. He tested more athletic than I thought he was actually going to at the combine. He may be destined for a slot role, and that's completely fine. because we've seen high volume slot receivers produce. The last guy I loved that much coming out of the draft was Cooper Kupp, and we know what happened there. So, Devin Duvernay is more athletic with the same type of route running ability, the same type of hands, and a similar build. So, Devin Duvernay is another wide receiver that I absolutely want to target near the back end of the first. So, those are my 2 wide receivers for that. And then if I'm looking at a running back, and again, landing spot's going to matter a whole heck of a lot for this guy. But Keyshawn Vaughn, another guy I've mentioned on the show before, this would be another kind of back into the first into early second type of pick for me, is a guy that I thought showed just as much as some of the guys that caught more hype, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, for example. Keyshawn Vaughn, I think, is more well-rounded than some of the guys that are getting that top 4 hype, and was on a crap offense in Vanderbilt and still managed to produce. He showed some good chops between the tackles. He showed some good speed. He showed that he can be a strong runner, and then he has plus vision. So Keyshawn Vaughn's probably my favorite, shall we say, value running back that I would still take near the back of the first round after some of those guys are gone. So everybody knows about the top end names, so I wanted to pretend like I'm picking near the back of the draft or the back of the first round or middle to back of the first round
for sure
with those 3 picks.
For sure. You guys have taken both Rager and Bond from me. Those are 2 guys I love running backs of profile. As a true bell callback, Bond, 40.4% college operator rating, was just below Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers for running backs. You want a running back that can do it all. And he did it with Vanderbilt, the worst team in the SEC. So the level of competition he's playing it's just an absolute smash. So give me Keyshawn Vaughn. Science, I hope he can get that day 2 capital so a team wants to invest into him and will give him the opportunity in year 1 to pay off on that value. We already talked about Rager. I'm going to throw a quarterback for the super flex leagues, and that's going to be Jalen Hurts. I fucking love Konami Code.
Yes, I'm right there with you.
Konami Code quarterback is the guy that I want. Hurts, it's been an up and down story for us. We started in 2017, his freshman year, where we, as a show, fell in love with Darius Stewart, and we all hated Jalen Hurts because he was raw. He was a raw prospect then, and he still broke out with Alabama that year. We saw the up and down struggles. He gets moved to he gets moved to Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, and he just balls out 20 rushing touchdowns. The guy just gets it done. And the NFL has moved. I think it's moved to teams that will target a player and will build their offense around them. It's not drafting the player to fit your scheme. It's building your scheme around the prospects. I think Hurts is going to be a day 1 guy. I think he'll end up in that Lamar Jackson type of situation where a team will fall in love. They know they can get him at the back end and they'll trade up and draft him. And at that point, Hurts has the upside in fantasy, the upside to be the best fantasy scoring quarterback in this entire draft class. And I love Tua. I'm a big fan of Burrow. But Hurts has the rushing ability. He ran a 4.59. It's 123.8 burst score. This guy will be a beast. Yes, he's a little bit offense dependent. The scheme has to fit him the same way that Baltimore was able to build with Lamar Jackson. But give me Hurts. The guy has just continued to produce and has gotten better and better. I don't give a shit about a guy that can't, go past his first or second read. We've seen quarterbacks being able to do that and have success. See Josh Allen, see Daniel Jones, see even a guy like Kyler Murray, guys that are rawer than Hurts that hasn't had the long-term production as Hurts has had in college. Give me Jalen Hurts. Give me that guy in Superflex. He's a guy I'm going to target, in that second or third round of my single QB leagues because the upside is fucking huge on him.
Could not agree more on that Hurts call. I mean, actually, I remember it was during the combine. I probably watched it like 2 or 3 times, but his whiteboard session with Steve Mariucci, like where he sat down, Mariucci like laid out a play that he would run with one of his offenses. I mean, he gave like all 4 options, like what he expected the receivers, the route depth for each of them. And then he had Jalen Hurts like walk through and actually and then recite that same play and Hurts was able to do it flawlessly. I mean, he was able to just retain that knowledge. I mean, it was like two receivers to the left, both him at option routes. You had the running back coming out to the flats, like to the right, tight end, like with an option route with like he was doing like some sort of like drag route across the middle. I mean, Hurts was able to recite all of that and why they were doing it, what his read would be, like depending on what the defensive coverage was. The kid knows how to play the quarterback position. He knows how to read defenses. He knows how to like move protections based off of coverages. I mean, I think regardless of where he winds up, hell, I mean, Carolina takes him. Let's go.
God, let's go, baby.
I mean,
let's go.
With Joe Brady and all that yak receivers.
I mean, come on, man.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm hoping for the right landing spot, but I'm hoping nothing for the best, like for Jalen Hurts.
I'm with you. All right, some later round guys. I'll go ahead and start here because I don't want anybody taken, and who knows if they will be or not. Wide receiver, I mentioned him last week. I'm going to mention him again. Gabriel Davis is a guy I'm looking at in the later rounds. He's another guy that was super productive in college and tested better at the combine than what I was expecting him to. He shows off really the ability to I don't want to say separate, but he has very, very good positioning, and he can separate on his release. But he has really good long speed too. He doesn't necessarily have short range quickness to him, but he has really, really good long speed. He's a long strider. He tested better in the 40 than I thought he was going to. He's got solid hands. He's got positioning down to a fine art. The route running is solid enough. And for a guy that I'm willing to take a late round flyer on, give me a guy that produced in college, that has good size, that checks the boxes athletically, and that showed the ability to win with some technique with not only his release, but a bit of his route running and his body positioning as well, showing that he knows how to use that frame. Because there's nothing more wasted than a big receiver that doesn't know how to use a frame. And then we'll see where the draft capital puts him, but A.J. Dillon's another running back. I don't know if he necessarily fits the bill of late round. I don't know if he'll be late round or not. But A.J. Dillon's another running back that, again, for being a guy that came in at 250 pounds and just massive, tested very, very well athletically. He was a sub 4.5 40, I believe. He was a 105 plus on his size-adjusted speed scores. Size-adjusted agility scores were good. When you watch the film, he's an absolute between-the-tackles banger. He's not going to get you a ton of breakaway runs, but he doesn't take negative plays. He's got decent vision, and he's just a guy that's going to grind out in short yardage situations, in close down a game situations. I said that kind of a position I'd like to see him in is almost as a compliment to maybe a Kerryon Johnson in Detroit, for example. He's not going to be a 3-down back, I don't think, because he doesn't have the athleticism to take the passing work, or at least didn't show it in college and didn't show it on film, even though he tested with it. But I definitely see a role for him in an NFL offense, even if it is just a between the tackles banger.
Absolutely love it. What do you got, Chris, for yours? You got a couple guys you want to targeting in that back into the drafts?
Yeah, this first guy, like, I don't even know like what he is like yet. It's Lynn Bowden.
Okay.
Bowden? I don't know how to
a lot of people.
Lynn Bowden.
You're not alone in that too. A lot of people love him and don't know how to do it. It almost reminds me of like a Jalen Samuels or a Curtis Samuel coming in, where they didn't really
don't know
have
what
a
to do with
position.
him. All I know is the dude can run.
Right.
So like he's one of those guys where it's just he's very scheme dependent. Like wherever he lands. So let's say if he were to land with, let's say like the Jets. I mean they just got rid of Robbie Anderson. I mean I know they got Perryman. Let's say they want to add more speed because they have enough like short area guys. I mean that fits. Like it makes sense to me. But it really just depends on where he winds up at. But it's just like with that athleticism, like he put the ball in his hands. I mean, it's just like he's one of those guys that I could see myself taking a shot on. I wouldn't mind like trying to figure out, okay, like what happens? Like, is he somebody that could hit? And especially since he has that versatility, if you put him with, I guess, a creative mind, if you put him with a good, like an offensive coordinator that was creative, that knew how to use guys, like with that skill set, what could you get? Like, and I wouldn't mind trying to figure that out. So I think he's one guy that I'm interested in, and I want to at least try and if he's available again in the later rounds, I wouldn't mind taking a shot at him. Hold him for at least his rookie season, see where he winds up at, and then kind of reassess from there. Him for sure. I'm not sure. I don't think it'd probably be a later round guy, but I want to see where the draft capital winds up on a guy like Zach Moss. Like I keep seeing and I keep hearing like just different takes on what his skill set is. What I've seen from tape is like he's definitely not a he's not a 3-down back. I think we can all agree with that. But like with what he does between the tackles, and he does have some pass catch ability. Like I could see him kind of filling in that, let's say, goal line, that type of role, like that short area role where it's just he gets some of those money touches and he can make some value there. It really just depends on situation. I think the best fit that I could think about off the top of my head would be somewhere like Buffalo. I mean, assuming Frank Gore leaves like within the next year or so, I mean, as he'd be an excellent complement to a guy like Devin Singletary. I mean, let Singletary be that between the 20s, have him be the pass catching like type back. And then for those goal lines like situations, those short area like third down situations, let a guy like Zach Moss like bang it through. I mean, I wouldn't mind that. But like drafting him to be like your RB1, I don't know how well that works. I just don't see it working out that way. But I've kind of seen the needle push him towards he could be that guy. And I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet because I don't see him having that long speed that would generally give you that inclination that he could be like your every down back. But I'm waiting to see what draft capital says and how we should evaluate him. But he's just a guy I really have my eye on the later rounds, or at least in the second round or later.
So Zach Moss going to Buffalo could definitely happen. Frank Gore is not on Buffalo's roster.
No.
Right now it's Devin Singletary, Taywan Jones, CJ Yeldon, and something named Christian Wade.
Never even heard of that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of Christian. I have heard of Christian Wade.
He sounds like a lead singer of a Christian rock band.
That's absolutely correct.
I was gonna say a straight to Netflix action movie. Lead.
Oh my god! Yes. All right, I got a couple names. We talked about these two guys last time. We'll start with Antonio Gibson. I absolutely love a player that has again, what is he going to play in the NFL? They asked him to test with the running backs at the Senior Bowl. He did extremely well at the combine. He tested as a receiver. A lot of them, a lot of people said it's because you'll get paid more, as a receiver. We're talking about a guy who could land on a team to replace a guy like Kenyon Drake. If he goes to the Cardinals, becoming that next David Johnson, who's got the same size and very similar skill set, while he only has 1 year of actual, a true production, 15.5 yards per touch, 11.2 yards per carry, the 19.3 yards per reception. The guy just, whenever he gets to football, he just knows how to get the most out of it. He's 6 foot 228, so he's got the BMI for it. He's got the size for it. If an NFL team drafts wherever he lands, if they want to use him in that type of way, make him become a running back, which I think could happen, as early as year 1. I'm not going to say it could happen, but I think it's in that realm of outcomes. He could be the next David Johnson, a converted running back from receiver and just smashes because the team wants to give him that type of volume and workload out of the backfield. And then my second guy is Tyler Johnson. I'm from Minnesota. I'm not the biggest or the world's biggest college football fan, but I've been following the Gophers for a very long time. And while Tyler Johnson has definitely lost value, I think the Dynasty community views him a lot higher than the actual NFL does. And not testing at the combine definitely hurt him. But he was honest about it with COVID going around and all the pro days being, pretty much gone. We didn't get to see him actually test even there. So there's a lot of unknown with him. But what we do know is that the guy just absolutely smashed. 57.2 dominant already, 98th percentile. He broke out at 19 a 90th percentile there. On paper, the guy just completely dominated. Does a lot of his work from the slide. So if he can land on a team with a young QB who needs that safety net, see Cooper Kupp with Jared Goff, the Rams from a few years ago. Johnson can definitely smash. I don't think he's not as unathletic as some people may think he is. As long as the NFL can view him in that sort of light, if he can become a day 2 pick, I would be so fucking happy.
Spoken like a Minnesota fan.
Right. For sure.
All right. I'm also going to combine the next two here because they kind of go hand in hand. So back to sort of the homebrew thing. I've got a story here for both of these. But Chris, what was your greatest idea for a beer that just didn't necessarily pan out on the execution front? And compare that to a fantasy take.
Yeah, so this goes back to my only batch that was that I could never actually drink. So I attempted to brew an Irish red, and like I had seen like a number of different just like I sampled a couple at some local bars. I had a couple like myself from some other local homebrewers, and I was like, dude, I have to try these because they look great. I mean, I love the taste, I love the flavor. So let's give this a go. So I found a recipe, and I think it was while I was still doing extract. I forget if I'd converted to all grain at that point, but either way, the brew itself was fairly normal. I mean, I didn't have too many hiccups there, but I was reading. Forget what I was reading. It might have been like a brewing magazine, or I might have been just like surfing the forums or something like that. And I'd seen that somebody had mentioned that Irish reds, like they sometimes have like a hint of chocolate to them. So some folks like they might have like either they might add some like cocoa powder like to them or whatever, but there might be just like a hint of chocolate in them. I was like,
Okay.
oh, okay, well, fine, I'll give that a shot. Well, I didn't have cocoa powder on me, so what I decided to do was I decided to grab just actual like Hershey chocolate chips directly out of the cupboard, and I just took a handful of them and I threw them into the fermenter. Well, for folks that don't know, chocolate chips have milk in them. And what happens like when you just let milk sit there in a fermenter, especially when it still has active yeast in it?
Oh boy.
Yeah. So fast forward a couple of weeks. I mean, of course, like I opened up the fermenter and I was like, oh man, like the CO2, like, that hit me real quick, but I was like, oh, that's just alcohol. No big deal. I bottled it all up, and then just let it sit for another week or so. And then afterwards, I'm like, guys, you've got to try like this Irish red that I just made. It's going to be great. It's got like hints of chocolate in it. It's going to be awesome. So I'm passing bottles out to my buddies. I sent a 6-pack home with a friend of mine who lives about a half hour or so away. A couple other of my buddies that I play cards with. I was like, here, just give it another week. I just bottled it last week. Give it another week to condition. It'll be good. 2 days later, I'm sitting here at home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it. This has to be ready by now. I'll just try a quick peek or whatever. Pop the tab off of one of them. One, there was no carbonation. I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But I'll just try and see. I'll try and taste it. I have never tasted anything so sour and so terrible in my mouth. Like it like the instant it hit my tongue, I almost threw up. Because it had already like it had curdled, and it was just like the nastiest flavor that I'd ever had before. I had to completely throw it out. I immediately called like my buddy that lived like a half hour away. I was like, dude, do not drink the beer. And he actually had some of it cracked like right then. And like he's holding the phone, like talking to me. And then with his other arm, he grabs the beer out of his brother-in-law's hand because he had already like handed it over to him. He was just like, thank you for calling me. I'll talk to you later. So I had to go into work the next day and explain to him what had happened. And it was super embarrassing. Like I was like, we laughed about it later, but I was just like, I'm trying to like, for the life of me, like I think it was like a day or two before it even dawned on me. what are chocolate chips made out of? I was just like, oh, it's chocolate. It should be good.
And it's
Like,
milk
no, dummy.
chocolate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not cocoa nibs, it's milk
Yeah.
chocolate.
So I thought it was a great idea. It was not. And I paid for it. That was 5 gallons of beer that I had to completely dump out. So, yeah, that was the one time that I've made something where I could not drink it afterwards.
Right, and a fantasy take that you've made and could not live with it afterwards. 'Cause we've all
That
had
was
one.
actually this past season when I made heavy investments into Damian Williams.
Nice.
I believed.
That
I
was
wanted to believe.
my favorite thing
I-
that blew up in people's faces last year.
Yep, I wanted to believe. I'm sorry, I'm still a sucker. I still believe. And I saw the playoffs the year prior, and I was like, he could do this. And yeah, that obviously did not work out for me and other folks. So, and then I just got suckered right back in after this past season, the playoffs. He did it again. And yeah, the only thing that could wind up saving me from myself is if the Chiefs wind up investing in a good running back in the draft. But otherwise, yeah, I'm still stuck on that guy. I have no idea
You
what
need
it
something
is.
better
Maybe
than
it's
Darwin
like the
Thompson?
I have to root for the underdog type of thing. I don't
Yeah.
know. But yeah, that was another take that I had that just blew up right in my face.
All right, so my story with this, it was my second batch, and I had this glorious idea of I'm gonna try to do a caramel apple ale. Sounds good.
Oh yeah.
And I started looking at things online, like how am I gonna do this? And there were different ways to get like a true caramel flavor in there outside of just malt. There are people that are like, yeah, caramelize a quart of wort, put it back in the boil after you caramelize it. There was boil apples or add actual apples to the boil. There were people that, add cider at bottling, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know which one of these is going to work. Fuck it. I'm just going to do all of it. So, the way that ended up is, throughout the boil and everything, it was fine. I didn't account for the amount of sugar content that was going to be added with apples in the boil and caramelizing wort and the added fermentables to that, if you will. So ended up a little, I don't want to say short on yeast, but there's some miscalculation there. And then I cold crashed it before I put it in the bottling bucket, but then I didn't put a starter in it or anything, so the yeast had gone dormant. So I bottled the thing, and 2-3 weeks later, still flat, completely flat. And like I've drinking one of the bottles flat, and I'm like, man, the flavor is mostly there, but this thing is entirely flat. And it's like this murky brown, hazy color, and I'm like, yeah, flavor's all right, but it needs to carbonate. And I talked to some guys, and they're like, oh, just empty the bottles, throw some yeast back in, and throw it back in the bottles, see what happens. Well, when I went, it ended up actually ending up being not a complete tragedy, because when I went to open the bottles to start to dump them, to put yeast in them, and try to get them to carbonate again, they were actually carbonated. So I think when I cold crashed it, I had slowed the yeast activity so much that, during bottle conditioning, I wasn't getting any form of carbonation whatsoever, and it eventually picked back up. So it ended up carbonating. The clarity didn't end up being that great. It ended up actually being drinkable. I still have a few bottles of it, even though the apple flavor is mostly dissipated because fruit's one of the first things to go. It ended up being way more boozy than I wanted it to be. And probably the worst one I've done so far, but really overall, I think I was just trying to bite off more than I could chew and do too much with it instead of picking, okay, to get caramel flavor, I'm going to do this one thing instead of these 4 things. And to get apple flavor in it, I'm going to do this one thing instead of these 3 things. And, was a little ambitious for my third batch overall, second batch on my own without my hand being held. So, and if I had to compare that to a take, I would say it's probably most comparable to Kenyon Drake a couple of years ago with the Dolphins, just keeping with the Kenyon Drake theme on this show, where I was all about him being the guy, and it just, well, it was actually last year. It was all about him being the guy in Miami, and it just didn't pan out. I traded for him thinking he was just going to be the guy, get all the touches. Didn't happen. And then he gets traded to Arizona and it ends up being fine. So I think that there was kind of a nice parallel between that whole, oh shit, I tried to do too much experience and that Kenyon Drake take. So the alternative to that is, what have you done that you're most proud of, and what's been one of your best fantasy takes? Maybe something that was an unpopular opinion and ended up working out.
So I'd say the beer that I'm most proud of is the beer that won me my very first award at a competition. So this was 2 years ago. It was 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. It was actually, you guys might be able to see it. It's
Yep.
Yeah, well, no, it's not that one. There it is. Yeah, it's that one right there. First place that I'd won. And actually the name of it is I Am Fruit. It was a milkshake IPA that I had made with pineapple, and it was pineapple, strawberry, and apple. I had added I chopped up a bunch of it. So it was a slightly basic milkshake IPA recipe that I had found with lactose, citra, and some Galaxy. All the hops were late hopped Whirlpool editions. And then I dry hopped with a little bit more of each of those. And then I added in the pineapple, strawberry, and apple on top of that. I think also I added some vanilla extract as well, I think. But it was just like, I just had this idea and I was just like, yeah, I want to try and combine as many of these like fruity flavors as possible and just kind of see what happens. And that I had no idea I was going to wind up winning that award. And like by the time it was at so it's called Beer and Sweat. It's hosted by the Bloatarian Brewing Club. They're based out of Kentucky. And since it's all kegging, what you can do is after you submit your keg, and then so basically from like 6 p.m. until they actually start giving out awards at about 9ish, you're just walking around sampling keg after keg after keg. Like you basically just get to sample like all the submissions like to the competition, which are like 100 plus.
Right.
And so by that time I'm hammered because I had no illusions that I was going to win absolutely anything. I was just there for fun, talking with other home brewers, people that have been doing it for decades, just enjoying my time. And when they called the description of my beer, they were like, a milkshake IPA with pineapple and like all that. The crowd is silent. The announcer's like talking, and because I'm drunk, I literally like yelled out, "Oh my god!" because I had realized that I had won, and then they called me up, and then I got that medal. I was freaking out, but yeah, that was like one of the. I mean, absolutely, like I love going to the competition. I've gotten an award, I think, every year so far. Like, knock on wood. I'm hoping they actually have it this season,
right,
or this year rather. But yeah, that was the beer that I'm most proud of. And I want to say the fantasy football take that I'm most proud of is that this past season, again, when everybody was on Patrick Mahomes, everybody was on the Lamar Jackson and his success. Like, while I definitely like love Lamar Jackson, don't get me wrong, but
right.
we saw this coming. I think that the Konami code, understanding like what he could do with his legs, even making a mediocre step forward as a passer, we could see that happening. But I have always subscribed to the late round quarterback drafting strategy. I'm a consultant with Draft Day Consultants with Denny Carter. I work for him. And like I was on that train, I think from the jump, actually at the expo, the first year of the expo when I was there, I was sitting next to, oh my gosh, the guy from RotoViz, and I cannot believe I forgot his name. Oh, Curtis Patrick from
Yep.
RotoViz, sitting right next to him at a panel, and people were asking about their strategies and quarterbacks that they were interested in. I said Dak Prescott should be that quarterback that you should be investing in. I mean, if he's that late round guy that you want to think that has that ability to use both his skills as a passer and also as a runner, because at the time, I think he was, after the previous season, he was top 5 in red zone rushing. I mean, he was already like a pretty decent passer. I don't want to say like a prolific passer or anything like that, but he was also, I mean, well known for being able to a decent passer. We think that offense is going to take a step forward. I that was a call that I was happy with. To see him finish now, and he's more or less, I want to say, at least in redraft or early best balls, he's being drafted as QB5, somewhere in there. Actually, I have ADP like right here in front of me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, he's QB6. Take that back, right behind Kyler Murray. So to see a guy that was being drafted in the teens, like around Kirk Cousins the year prior, and like just kind of pushing that, and I was advising my clients. I took him in a couple of leagues. I was just happy to see that call actually pan out.
Nice.
I was super on the Dak Prescott train, and we were pretty off of him, I think, after his rookie year. And then
We
when
jumped
we
back
saw
on.
his option change, like
Yeah.
we pumped him up. Like he was my QB6, I think, entering last year, if not my QB5. And it was always Dak Prescott for us.
And I actually might have been on that panel with you, because I seem to remember a Dak Prescott take that I agreed with, and then giving a Jameis Winston take on the same panel. So
yeah,
I think I was there with you for that.
Yeah, I think that one I was just like that. That was the first one that I think, because I was like towards the back end of it, because I think I was right next to Bob Harris.
Yes,
I think he was sitting next to me.
Yep.
And then like Phillip Rivers. I think somebody said Phillip Rivers like right before me. And then I was like, oh, of course, like, yeah, that would have been like my pick. And I was like, but Dak Prescott, like, he makes the most sense. I mean, at least from a late round drafting perspective. So
sure.
But that one, I held on to that I'd been drafting quite a bit, like in best balls during the off season. And then I held on to that for most of like my redraft teams and my clients' redraft teams. So it worked out.
I owned a lot of Dak Prescott. I bought into my own takes, which is probably what most people should be doing. But yeah, I owned a shit ton of Dak Prescott last year.
So for me, so far the thing that I've done on my own that I've been the most proud of, and Dan actually got to try one of these too. But I did I haven't officially named it, but what I did was I basically took 2-row. Is, obviously the base for beer, just regular 2-row pale malt. And then I used a secondary grain bill that is basically what a wheated bourbon would be. So of the secondary grain bill, 51% of it was corn. There's a certain percentage, I want to say like 17, that I did is malted wheat. And then a portion of it that was barley. And then I got these wood cork screws that were char level number 3, which is what Buffalo Trace uses, or Makers uses, sorry. And so brewed it, and then in secondary dropped them on those oak cork screws for 2 weeks, and I cheated a little bit. There was some caramel 60 in there too to just help along the flavor. But that beer ended. I don't think it could have possibly turned out any better. I did sanitize the charred oak corkscrews with a little bit of Knob Creek 120 too, just to also cheat that a little bit on the bourbon flavor. But
yeah,
that could not, I don't think, have turned out any better from what I had dreamed it up, from a flavor profile perspective, from a color perspective, from a clarity perspective. Like, that is what I was going to enter this summer, because it just hit everything that I wanted it to hit. And again, early on, but that has been my favorite thing that I've done so far. And my favorite my favorite take will surprise nobody that's been listening to the show for any amount of time. Dan can probably recite it by now. Cooper Kupp coming out of college.
Yep.
And then again last season, Cooper Kupp coming off of an ACL injury, where my distinguished co-host wanted to hate on Cooper Kupp, which is something that I could never do. So
I was tepid. I didn't hate. I was nervous about the ACL.
I was on Cooper Kupp coming out of college though, as a guy that might be a day 2 type of pick. They had the skill set to produce almost immediately in the NFL, and then he came in and did that, and he was on pace to have a wide receiver 1 season and tore his ACL last year. And then I was on him again with, Dan was worried about him coming back slowly, and I'm like, nah, he doesn't, necessarily win athletically. He's going to come back. He's going to be fine. And he came back, and I think was his wide receiver 1 or 2 for the first half of the season. Before, yeah, was just absolutely tearing it up. So the fact that I've been right on everything involving Cooper Kupp is probably what I'd compare most to that beer.
It did pain me to have to say, be careful on Cooper Kupp. We've seen it before with other players with ACL injuries, and Kupp just said, "Fuck it." It wasn't for the Rams, kind of, I guess, being assholes with how they wanted to use their playmakers towards the back end of the season. I think Kupp could have been even better.
I agree. All right, Dan, you got one question left.
Yeah, this one will be quick, and I have borrowed this from Matt Kelly. I'm a huge Podfather fan. I'm a huge Matt Kelly fan. I know he's very very divisive in the Twitter community for how he is, but when it comes to his shows, he is one of the best hosts of all time in terms of fantasy. So he likes to end his shows on asking this question. I want to borrow that as well for all of our guests here. The last question, I want you guys to give me your boldest fantasy football take for the 2020 season. We'll start with Chris again.
My boldest take for the 2020 season is that not just DJ Moore, but Curtis Samuel, both of them, wind up as wide receiver 1s at the end of 2020. That is my take.
Oof, I love it.
That is my take.
What do you got? What do you got, Hopper?
Not quite as bold, but I'm gonna double down on the DeAndre Hopkins thing and say that he finishes outside of the top 12 in we'll call it half point PPR this season.
Okay, mine will be I half wasn't going to do one, but I'll figure one out.
I have a feeling I'm going to have to answer this question at least 17 more times throughout the course of the offseason anyway, so that's probably going to change every time.
I mean, you don't always have to answer. It's meant for the guests, but we'll always do it too. But we'll go with with another 2 wide receiver finishing in the top 12. Maybe it's not as bold, especially with Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore, but we're going to go with Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper becoming the next Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, finishing as top 5 receivers in the NFL this year.
I mean, I would love that because Michael Gallup was my mid-round wide receiver draft crush last year. So
yeah, you and I in 2018.
Or wait, that would have been 2 years ago. Yeah.
I still love Michael Gallup. I think his role is absolutely perfect.
Yep.
There's one every year. Michael Gallup ends up hitting and having wide receiver 1 seasons. That would make me 2 for 2 through our first 2 seasons. So I'd be super happy about that. Devin Duvernay's a lock for that this year, by the way. Just saying.
All right. Last one. We're going to end it on the last brewery question, or last, I guess, homebrew question. Yeah. And then we'll get you out of here.
All right. Most frustrating thing about homebrewing. What's your advice to anybody that wants to get into it? Kind of a 2-parter, kind of a 1-parter, though.
I would say easily the most frustrating part, I guess, about homebrewing is this is probably for a lot of folks. I mean, unless you just happen to have the resources around. It's just the waiting. And I think we talked about this earlier. Yes. It's just that, like, you go through all the steps. I mean, your brew day, 4, 5, 6 hours, and then it's the turnaround time. Because I mean, you brew 5 gallons and you taste it. You figure out what you did right, what you did wrong. and you want to make changes, but then how long are you typically waiting until you get to make those changes? It's not like you can just, run right back out, buy $30 worth of stuff, clean all your pots and pans and your kettle and all that stuff. Refill your propane tank if you're using a burner, and just go right back at it. I mean, the setup is just what takes time, and it's just people don't always have like that Saturday or Sunday or whatever in order to do it. I think that's the frustrating part, is that unless you are documenting everything and going back through your notes and checking, well, what did I do here? How long was my mash? What temperature did I mash out at? Did I Vorloff, or did I just let it sit and then just completely, like pour off my first runnings? I mean, all those like little things that if you wait 6, 8, 10 weeks before you do your next brew day, you're gonna forget those things. And for me, I literally have a journal where I've just started writing stuff down. At this time I did this, at this time I did this, I took this temperature, I did this, pH was that, I use this type of water. I have most of my recipes are in spreadsheets now. Just like little stuff that seems super nerdy, but for me it's just that, like, when I want to try and figure out what I've done right and wrong, and I want to be able to go back and see, okay, what did I do to this recipe? It's just I want to be able to track that so I can actually not make the same mistakes and improve on my stuff. So I think that's the most frustrating part. And so for people that are just starting off, I would say try and do that. I mean, follow, if you're extract, all grain, whatever, and you have recipes, like for most part, for most folks, like if you get just like the kits from like Northern Brewer or wherever, and they give you like the step-by-step instructions, you can deviate from that if you want. I wouldn't try and just go completely off the beaten path, but try and like make notes. Okay, like you did 5 gallons of strike water, or you did, or like write down your calculations or when you added stuff. And if you were supposed to add in 0.25 ounces of this hops, but really it was like 0.3, or you measured it short and it was 0.2. I mean, write that down too. I mean, try and keep as many notes as possible so when you go back and take a look at what you've done, it's not just you're trying to like recall something that happened 2 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. There are notes that you have sitting there right in front of you. Even something as simple as your starting and finishing gravity readings were, so you can calculate ABV. I mean, it's just a lot of those little things that can wind up later on down the line, like helping you realize what you need to tweak during your brew so that you can either increase your efficiency or like to hit some of those flavor notes that you're trying to get.
Sure. I gotta agree with your take on the most frustrating part. It's the wait, and for me, it's the wait, and then having something come out, because you're not gonna get a recipe perfect on the first try. It's just not a thing. And having something come out and then not being able to immediately turn and correct it, because like you said, there's a lot of cleaning, a lot of sanitation, a lot of prep that goes into it. You go to the local homebrew store. Do they have the stuff in? Is there anything that you need to order in? And then you've got to have the free day on the weekend in order to do it. But also the fact that, unless you're just hell bent on getting that one recipe perfect, you're probably not going to go back immediately to that recipe right away either. Or at least I know I don't. It's going to be, months, a year maybe before you double back and try to take another shot at that recipe, because you're going to want to try something else. You're going to have another idea, and just that process of trying to get it right and just that patience. And my advice would be, and this is something I was told and I found it to be true, if you screw something up a little bit and it's still drinkable, don't be afraid to share that out and to get feedback on it, because there are such things as happy accidents. There may be some things that you didn't like in the flavor profile that maybe other people see as a positive, because everybody has a different palate. There's different feedback that experienced brewers are going to be able to give you. So don't feel like you need to hide those mistakes, embrace them, use them as learning experiences, but also realize that just because something doesn't turn out perfectly as you intended doesn't mean it turned out bad. And don't be too hard on yourself would be my advice. So, all right. That is all we have for you. So hopefully if you're listening to this point, first off, gold star for you. Hopefully you found this episode very, very informative. It's just probably the most informational episode we've ever had outside of fantasy football anyway. I know I learned things. Dan, I'm sure you learned things.
There's so much shit I like. It's like information overload that I'm gonna have to. I'll be picking both your brains as soon as I start buying a book.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
it will definitely happen. It's not an if, it's a when.
Sure. So, just thank you everybody for listening. I hope you found that as engaging and as entertaining as I know we did, especially with the homebrew talk and kind of a look into really the brewing process. We do a lot of tasting and a lot of sampling on the show. We don't typically get into the behind the scenes part, so hopefully that was good for our listeners. Chris, one more time, go ahead and toss out where people can find your work, where people can find you.
You can come find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. You can find most of my writing over at 4for4 during the off season. You can find some of my video work because I do a weekly Dynasty mailbag for Dynasty League Football. So you can check out the YouTube channel for them there. I think it's just like DLF, or just search DLF and it should pop up. And then also doing some work over at Numberfire in season. So like right now, our big push is both best ball leagues, since there are a lot of degenerates that are already betting on what's going to happen in the 2020 season. I'm one of them.
Same here.
So I'm definitely hopping into some of those best ball leagues over on the FFPC and over on Fanball. So definitely check out some of my work, and I've got a few strategy pieces out for that already. But then we're transitioning into some Dynasty work. Also over at 4for4, so I'll definitely be pitching in and writing some articles there on some strategy for how to deal with some of your upcoming drafts. So, yep, all that stuff, 4for4, DLF, Numberfire. That's where you can find me at.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much for the large time commitment this evening. I've had a blast. I am at Hot BFF with 2 Ps. You can find me on Twitter there. We are at BeerfieldFF on Twitter, Beerfield Fantasy Football on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube while we drop the episodes on Wednesday for audio. They can show up at any point on YouTube because they're just live streams. We want you guys to show up. We want you to ask questions. We want you to interact there. So hit the notification icon, hit the like button. We record everything live. That's how you're going to get notified when we're actually recording. Dan is at Theory BFF. Dan, any parting words?
Yes, we got to start promoting merch again. We still have shirts available, hats. We are out at the moment.
Oh, hey, I am wearing I'm wearing a shirt. I know you can't see.
We still have a lot of shirts.
I know you can't see me right now, but I do have the for those on YouTube, I do have the gray Beerfield Fantasy Football shirt on today. We also have these in red and teal.
Yep, we have them in all sizes. We'll have hats again. We definitely plan at some point having, koozies, shot glasses, and all sorts. If you want to support the show, that's the best way to do it. We do have a Patreon, but we don't really look at it. We do this more for fun instead of for profit. Hence why we for 3 fucking hours and we don't give a shit.
None of it'll be edited.
Again. So thank you guys again for staying with us this long. This is, I've learned a lot. This is one of my favorite styles of doing things like this, and hopefully we can keep doing this moving forward. And that's all I gotta say.
Sure. Yeah, but none of this will be edited either because that takes extra time that, we just don't do.
That's right. Give the raw video,
the raw glory,
raw audio.
That's how we do it. Well, it's going to be on YouTube that way because we live stream it. So what's the point of modifying the audio? All right. Thank you guys. We will catch you guys next week. Hopefully we'll have another guest. We'll have another set of questions, and we might try to get one of these 12 packs under 2.5 hours because the last 2 have been great. and the conversation is great. I understand that's a lot to ask out of people to listen, though. But thank you guys for doing it. We appreciate it. See you next time.